Welcome back to the channel. This is Trinity Storm and you are watching first part of What If Naruto Becomes No Life King. If you enjoy this video, please like, share and subscribe to the channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
The 8-year-old's whole world was dark. It had been that way for hours, which seemed like forever to him. The most recent mob put a torch in his mouth and eyes, leaving him blind and unable to eat or drink without extreme pain, though he hadn't tried. He didn't know where he was. All he knew was that he was standing on grass and that most of the wound in his mouth had healed, but he still couldn't taste anything. He hurt a lot when he put weight on his left leg, so he thought it must have been broken and was in the process of getting better. He got rid of those thoughts and tried to remember something that might help him figure out where he was, like a smell or how tall the grass felt. It didn't work. He only knew that the attack took place close to a gate. He stumbled for what seemed like hours, and the only thing in his way was an occasional tree. That didn't help though, because Konoha was full of trees and surrounded by them. Then he put his foot on stone. The only thing that made this interesting was how smooth the stone was and how similar the stones next to it felt, like he was standing on a walkway. Walkway go plashesh, Naruto said to himself with his tongue still stuck in his mouth. As he took a step forward, he felt more hopeful, but that feeling went away quickly when the ground gave way. At that point, gravity tends to fill you up. After 2 hours. What? He fell down and hit his head, or a big fucking rock hit him. Naruto had just enough sight when he woke up a few minutes earlier to know it was dark. Light came through the hole up above, but Naruto tried and tried but couldn't get to the top. He had given up and decided to keep walking. When he looked around, he saw that he was in some kind of corridor. If he reached out, he could almost touch both walls with his fingers. He was sure he wouldn't miss much if he stayed close to one wall, so he let his left side rest against it as he moved on. When he turned around, his vision was black again. As he moved forward in the dark, putting one foot in front of the other, it got colder and smellier. He closed his eyes a euro, or at least he thought he did, since the darkness didn't change a euro, and relied on the wall to lead him to the end of the hall, if there was one. He was smart though, and had his other hand out in front of him so he wouldn't walk into a wall, which is exactly what happened. No, it's not stone, he thought to himself as he ran his fingers over the cool metal. He gave it a light push, and even though it was heavy, it moved a little. He let go of the wall and pushed with what little strength he had. The door moved very slowly and made a loud noise the whole way. When the hole was big enough for him to walk through, he stopped pushing and stepped through. Almost immediately, he noticed that the air was much colder inside. But he heard a sound like water dripping, and he suddenly realized that his throat was dry. When he turned to face the noise, his foot caught on a rock and he fell. He wasn't hurt, but the tips of his right hand were touching a cool liquid about a foot in front of him. He dragged himself forward and hoped that he wasn't seeing things. He lowered his face until his lips touched the liquid and took a small sip. It was real, but he couldn't taste anything yet. He decided that not tasting the water was fine, and he began to drink, happy to have the liquid that could save his life. Red eyes looked at the child in front of him who was drinking from the pool that surrounded him. The sound of the door and the child's heartbeat woke him up, and he was about to eat for the first time in hundreds of years when he saw the child drinking the blood. The child looked like it was hungry and blind, so he didn't eat. "Who are you?" asked the old vampire, making the boy stop moving. Alucard noticed that he slowly looked up with eyes that were partly closed and tried to figure out what he looked like. He went back to drinking after a moment, but the old Helsing vampire could still hear what he was thinking. "I'm not a villager, and I'm not a dream." He asked again, "Who are you?" The quiet answer was, "It doesn't matter." Naruto noticed that he could feel his tongue again, but that his taste buds were still dead. "What year is it?" Alucard asked as he looked at how bad the room was. How long had he been sleeping, anyway? "The year of the bat," Naruto said. The more he drank, the more thirsty he got. The year's number. What are 2005 and 2050? He asked, starting to get a little annoyed. Naruto said, 1023 AFS, quickly, trying to make himself smaller. He was glad that Sarutobi told him what year it was. AFS? Asked Alucard. Even if the world had changed right after he went to sleep again, that would still be 1023 years. He looked at his hair and saw that it was dripping blood, just like the rest of his body, which at this point seemed to be half shadow. It means after the first shinobi, he said, wondering why he didn't know that. Alucard looked at his hands and saw that the white gloves that once tied him to the Helsing family were gone. They could only be gone if Helsing is gone, he said in a whisper, more to make sure than for any other reason. He was free, but the seriousness of the situation took away any sense of happiness from his empty heart. Sir Integra, Walter, and Sarah's. They are all gone. Sarah's might have lived, but it was unlikely if the end of the world had happened. Only he really lived forever. He looked at the blood around him and saw that it was full of shadows. The blood of 1,000,000 people. And where his power comes from. He almost laughed when the person tried to drink it to quench his thirst. Only vampires could drink blood to do that. When he thought about his past and how he became no-life king, his eyes got bigger. Blood from his burned home country and from many soldiers, which ran over his tongue and changed him. All he was now was blood and shadows, and from what I could tell, the 1,000-year sleep had taken away his ability to keep them separate. Why are you in such bad shape? He asked. Why have you been bleeding? Because he didn't think his death could be so easy. But he couldn't make the boy do it. It had to be his decision. The people in the town call me a demon. They chase me and beat me if they catch me doing almost anything. This time, they put a torch in my mouth and eyes. He complained as he took a break from drinking. I bet you want revenge. To see them bleed at your hands and make them suffer forever, he said, watching the boy's reaction in the dark. Before Naruto said anything, there was a long pause. I don't want to hurt them, he started, and Alucard almost cursed. That was the only way he could get the boy to kill him. But I want to get even. And what do you want to do to me? I want to live, she said. I want to walk down the street where everyone can see me and know that they can never hurt me or get away from me. I want them to respect me, Naruto said, using the word respect with more anger than Alucard had ever heard it used with. And what would you do to get back at them? Anything. He said as he tried to drink again. Then drink it all and don't leave a drop. Don't stop and don't look around. Drink every drop, and everyone will have to see you as the next no-life king. He lay down and changed into a shadow. After the long hibernation, he didn't have enough energy, though, and he could feel himself trying to harden. He tried to be a shadow, and a few seconds later, he felt something break. He was falling, and every soul he had taken was with him. He knew only one other thing about his situation. He had been killed by a person. He had gone through his memories, and after everything the boy had been through, he knew that he hadn't damned the boy. Instead, he had given the boy the chance to live, and because of that, Alucard had finally learned how to die. He almost smiled as he fell. I should have asked what his name was. Jaro Suikaze was sure he would be safe no matter who Konoha sent after him. He had a stronghold with walls that couldn't be climbed or jumped, traps and guards in every hall, and several ways to get out. Here, in his throne room, he had 6A-ranked missing ninja protecting him. That's right, whoever Konoha sent to kill him couldn't hurt him at all. An hour ago, a trap went off near the gate, and a barely audible scream let them know that one assassin had failed. Even though Jaro was calm, his guards were still on edge. He smoothed out his robes and said, I don't see what you are so worried about. When the trap went off, someone died, so we don't have to worry anymore. Yes, you're safe now that the guard who was dumb enough to walk into his own trap is dead, a calm voice from the shadows of the room said. Someone tall and dressed in dark stepped out of the shadows, holding a head by its hair. He held it up and listened to their shocked gasps, trying not to laugh darkly as they looked back and forth between the head and the dead sixth guard, who was still standing without a head. "You have such smart guards around you, Jaro Suakaze." "I'm insulted," he said, tossing the head away carelessly. He moved some of his neat black hair out of the way of his eyes. He could see the fear in their eyes when they saw his Anbu bat mask, with its obsidian color, crimson streaks that went down from the edges of his eyeholes to look like bloody tears, and alabaster fangs that stuck out of the bat's mouth. One of the guards took his huge Zanbatu off his back and said, "You're Nosferatu the Damned, Kanaha's top killer. I'm going to enjoy cutting you in half." He saw that Nosferatu was wearing the standard Anbu armor, but it was all black. He also saw that the 7-foot scarecrow only had one weapon, an katana that was resting on his hip. He was tall but not wide. He looked fast, not strong. "Since you're dead, I'm afraid you won't be cutting anything," Nosferatu said with a smirk behind his mask. "I'm feeling pretty damn alive right now." He yelled, and the other guards moved in close. "Good. Then the poison will spread faster because your heart is beating faster." "What are you?" he started, but couldn't finish because of a huge pain in his chest. He let go of his sword and put his hand over his heart. His eyes never got to the other side. Considering what he could do, Nosferatu moved slowly and put his katana through the man's throat and spine. He had to give credit to the man to his left, though, because he had acted as soon as he disappeared instead of trying to see him while he was moving at high Junin level speeds. He grabbed the katana with his left hand, broke it in a smooth motion, and thrust the broken blade through the side of the man's head with enough force for it to fly out the other side and stab another man in the eye, going through his skull and into his brain. 2 to go. Nosferatu moved his blade to the right, ripping out the first man's neck and deflecting the Zanbatu of another guard. When his katana went through Nosferatu's chest, the one who had moved behind him seemed pretty happy about it. He looked surprised when shadows came alive and poured out of the wound in the shape of a big mouth with sharp teeth and blood-red eyes all around it. As the jaws closed around his head, the look of horror on his face was invigorating. He thrust his left hand forward and sighed as it went through the Nuke-Nin's chest. He pulled him closer and used his shadows to move his mask up a bit, then sank his fangs into his throat. When the first man died, Jaro stood up and found himself stuck by something from behind. He looked down and saw a black blade. When he turned around, he saw that it led to Nosferatu's wound and the dead guards who had fallen around him. The last things he saw were Nosferatu drinking the blood of one of his guards like a vampire and a wider blade of shadows coming for his neck. Nosferatu muttered, "Why do all the strong ones taste like shit?" as his shadows tore the shrunken corpse to pieces. He walked calmly toward Yaro's head, wondering if the 5-second battle was really worth 500,000 ryo. Better than letting him live. Slave rings, prostitution, rape, and let's not forget the bandit attacks you sent after merchants. TCH, you should have been more careful. He grabbed the head by the hair and let his shadows flow back into him. This closed the wound, if it could even be called a wound. With a casual flick of his blade, he cleaned it of blood and bone, and it was soon back in its sheath. He walked toward the shadows, determined to move faster than any person could. It was nice to be the no-life king. Kona, after 10 minutes. After 8 years of dealing with him showing up out of nowhere, Tsunade wasn't surprised when the bat-masked Anbu sat down on her desk after she blinked. "I gave the kill order 30 minutes ago. I guess you didn't drag this one out," she said with a small smile as she looked up from her papers. Everyone who worked with the man was a little uneasy about the fact that he could kill without being hurt, but the Shinobi Council couldn't deny his skill. "I haven't had a cigarette in a while, so I decided to be quick about it, Tsunade-sama," he said as he put the severed head in her empty inbox. "That's what I don't get. You're a vampire, but you care more about smoking than blood," she said, sealing the head in a scroll and setting it aside. I get enough blood from my missions in the hospital. Are you worried too much about oxygen? He asked as he pulled out a cigarette. After he started to smell like tobacco, Tsunade made him switch to the flavored cigarettes, which smelled better. What have I told you about smoking in my office, Naruto? She asked with an annoyed look on her face. Naruto gave a shrug and took off his mask, letting it turn into shadows. He brought the cigarette to his mouth and let it hang from the corner of his lips. I haven't lit it yet. Before I leave, is there anything else the council wants me to do? I'm full right now, and I can hear my coffin calling to me, he half-joked. Tsunade sighed and shook her head, but she raised her hand slightly to stop him from leaving. She said in a serious tone, I might have a mission for you in 2 days. I'm still running it by the council, but from what you've told me so far, this could be your hardest assignment yet. Tsunade noticed that the vampire's eye sockets were usually dark, and he often complained of not being able to sleep. Naruto nodded. Had he not slept in a while? I can't help but notice that you didn't say dangerous, he said, his amethyst eyes seeming to bore into her soul. Of course, it wasn't done on purpose. Tsunade said in a more mocking tone, it won't be dangerous for you, Mr. No-Life King. Naruto bowed as if it were a compliment and stood up straight, his head a few centimeters from the ceiling. Now go get some sleep, because you look awful. I feel as good as I do any other night, but I'll try to follow your advice. People often say I look horrible, though, he said with a smile as he vanished in a wisp of shadows that weren't there. Terrible. But beautiful, Tsunade said, knowing that no matter what form he took, he could never quite get rid of the ethereal beauty that seemed to radiate from him. She wondered if that's why he liked his Anbu mask so much. She looked at the mission details in front of her and wondered if she was doing the right thing. In one way, this was probably the dumbest thing she'd ever do, like putting a hungry snake in a cage with a bunch of blind mice. On the other hand, Naruto didn't think he was strong enough to fight Orochimaru head-on, so this would slow down the snake's plans and give Naruto more souls to help him get stronger. Damn it. She said as she looked at Yondaimi's face. You were smart enough to know that a dagger won't stop a Zanbatsu, but Naruto is also smart enough. She almost laughed at the thought of Naruto getting mad when he found out about this. You mad? Most likely. Feeling scared? Yes, for sure. Even though his heart wasn't beating, the 20-year-old king had a heart of gold. Also, this was his way of getting back at him for all the times he scared her. Vengeance is sweet, but let's hope for once that he doesn't kill anyone. Manner namikaze. He said to himself as he looked at himself in a mirror, she was right. I do look terrible. He got some of Alucard's memories on that night 12 years ago, and now he looked like the old no-life king. Even though his eye sockets were a lot darker and his eyes were purple instead of red. Perhaps it's time for me to change my form again. He thought about doing it right away, but he decided to wait until he knew what Tsunade wanted him to do. He didn't like how she said it, and he might need a new face. Part of him wondered if he could use his real face, if it could be called that. It might be original, but he doubted that even he could stand looking like his real face, which showed everything about him. I haven't been sleeping enough. He muttered as he walked to his coffin and laid down in it, letting his Anbu gear fade back into shadows. He put the lid over him and let it close. He knew what was going on in the dark, and he could see details just as well, if not better, than he could in the light. He thought about the last no-life king and wondered when he would turn out to be like Alucard. They were two different vampires, so maybe never. Maybe in a few hundred years, he'll be able to see things from the vampire's point of view. He muttered, Sarah's Victoria. He had seen her in some of Alucard's memories. A young vampire, a Draculina, or a Nosferatu who wasn't alone at night. He didn't dare try to figure out what the old vampire was thinking or how he felt, because the few memories he had were already too confusing. If I'm lonely, I'll get a dog, he muttered with his eyes closed and a smile on his pale lips. Or even a bat. 2 days later, at 10:34 a.m., they were in Hokage's office. Like always, Tsunade said as she looked up and saw Naruto standing there. He must have just woken up from a 2-day nap because the darkness around his eyes was getting lighter. I'd rather stab before the right time than after. But if I miss the right time, I'd rather not stab at all, he said in a calm, smooth voice. He had just woken up. Is the mission ready now? Tsunade gave a smirk and held up a manila folder with her seal and the seal of the council. Naruto Hellsing Namikaze, aka Nosferatu the Damned, this may be a mission that is too hard for you. You can back out once you know the details, but not once you've started. Got it? She asked in a serious tone. The answer was, "Hi, Tsunade-sama." If she used the word Hellsing with his name, she must have been serious. You know about Orochimaru's desire for a Sharingan host and his failed attempt at Itachi, right? She asked, putting the folder down and interlacing her fingers. As soon as he nodded, she went on. He has his sights set on Sasuke, which is easy for him to do given the boy's need for revenge. However, we can't protect Sasuke directly or we'll alert the snake. When Orochimaru makes his move, we need an agent who is so well integrated into the system that it will catch almost everyone by surprise when they attack Old Fangface. You want me to attack Orochimaru without him knowing? He asked, not liking the idea. In an attack that was a surprise, he had a 75% chance of winning. He wasn't strong enough for the odds to be in his favor in a fight to the death. In a way, but it has to be done in a way that hurts him and makes him rethink the situation. An Anbu captain as famous as Nosferatu will get his attention. A genin who is the son of Yondaime attacking and hurting him will make him think he's slipping or make him even more paranoid, she said, smirking when Naruto realized what she meant. She was right. His eyes showed a lot of anger and fear. Tsunade-sama, you mean to tell me I have to pretend to be a genin and join a team so I can protect Sasuke from a distance? He asked, horrified by the idea. You know I have a hard time keeping my bloodlust in check around most humans. You're one of the few people I can fully control it around, and after a while, everyone else starts to look like walking blood bags. Naruto, if you don't want to do this, you can duck out. However, given your shapeshifting skills and power, you're the only one who can do this with a guaranteed success. However, I'd be lying if I said Sasuke was the only one to be protected. You're to be on, if you accept, Team 8 under Kurenai Yuhi, a new Junin who won't recognize your chakra signature. Your teammates are to be Kiba Inuzuka and Hinata Hyuga. You make fun of me. A human werewolf and 2 virgins, it's almost like you're trying to make me lose it, he said, slouching into a chair and covering his eyes with his hand. Tsunade asked, and how do you know they're virgins? Hinata's attitude made it pretty clear who she was, but Kurenai did what any woman her age would do. Call it vampire intuition, he said, not understanding why in the world she would even ask him that. So you don't want it? She asked as she was about to put it away. He said, I accept, which made the cage jump. She thought he wouldn't do it. To be honest, I should learn to control myself now, while I'm still young and strong. Also, I couldn't leave a helpless girl like Hinata to defend herself against the infamous perversion of the Inuzuka clan, he said, trying to sound brave. It was more to make himself happy than to make Tsunade happy. Are you sure? If anyone dies from suspicious neck wounds, I can't stop the shitstorm. Only the Shinobi Council and a few Junin know your true identity. The shitstorm will come from them, especially if one of the heirs is hurt, Tsunade said, handing over the mission folder. Also, change how you look. You should be around 16 years old, and you shouldn't look like a famous Anbu agent. Naruto asked, is this better? As his body turned into shadows for a moment before taking on a new shape. This is me in my original form. His height hadn't changed, which made Tsunade unhappy, but his shoulders looked about an inch or so thinner. Other than that, nothing had changed about his frame. Every other thing had. He no longer wore the normal Anbu armor. Instead, he wore a black trenchcoat with an odd design. It was like Vash's trenchcoat, but it had 2 sleeves instead of just one. He looked like he was wearing some kind of baggy pants that were tucked into black combat boots. His skin had actually changed from ash white to pale white. He didn't have any fat on his face, but if you looked closely, you could see that the skin around his eyes was darker than the rest of his face. The amethyst orbs themselves hadn't changed, but Tsunade noticed that they seemed a little softer than usual. This was good, because it meant that he wouldn't be able to scare people away with a simple look. She thought that his hair, which used to be short and black, had changed the most. It now reached the middle of his back and was pure silver. In the dark, it almost seemed to glow. Tsunade was a little bit mesmerized by his old form, which he hadn't used in 8 years. It had changed while he was pretending to be the last no-life king. He put his hand on the top of his katana and asked, "So what's my story?" No matter what form he took, Widabra never left his side. Nosferatu came out of nowhere. He didn't have a backstory, and even though he was an Anbu captain, he never took a team. No one knew what he looked like besides his mask, she said, giving him a compliment in a roundabout way for being secretive. It made it easy to do. You'll be the Yondaime's son, just out of private tutoring. If anyone asks, the Yondaime did piss off a lot of people, so we thought it would be best to train you in secret at first, instead of the academy. You got above average training and have a bloodline for shadow manipulation, but you're not good at it yet. If they ask where you got it, it's up to you, vampirism or the Kyuubi. He didn't hesitate for a second before saying, Kyuubi. When am I supposed to meet my team, and how long will it take? Kurenai-san will be at the academy in an hour to pick up her team. You and your teammates should go to the academy and wait for her. As for a time frame, we expect Orochimaru to strike during the Chunin exams. Until then, you should play the part well. You don't need to bond, but the Rookie 8, as they are called, should at least trust you. So many things could go wrong with this mission that it wasn't even funny. Hi. I'll leave right away, Tsunade-sama, he said, finally turning toward the door. Oh, there's one more thing. Stop talking like an Anbu. Just say what's on your mind. You're not old enough to know what not to say, and your political status gives you some leeway with the clan heads. Just don't overdo it, she said, realizing her mistake when she saw the vampire smirk. He laughed at the look of surprise on Tsunade's face and said, "All right, you crazy old bat." He didn't say a lot of things to people, mostly out of respect or because he didn't want to make too much trouble. She had just told him he could say everything. And not get caught. The secretary almost threw up when she saw the smile on his face as he left. Ninja school. Kiba said to the Hyuga girl, "So, Hinata-chan, it looks like we're on the same team." He was trying to flirt with her. Even though there was supposed to be a mysterious third person on their team, he still thought that Hinata would be all his own. Before she could tell him to leave her alone, the door slammed open, making everyone jump. Sorry about that. These doors are much lighter than the ones I'm used to, Naruto said as he walked through the door, scratching the back of his head. On the way over, he bought a pair of wire-frame sunglasses and put them on his nose so far down that only half of his amethyst eyes could be seen. Iruka said, "Hello, my name is Iruka Amino. Is there anything I can help you with?" She was a little taken aback by the man's height. Naruto is about 1.5 feet taller than most people in Konoha, give or take a few inches. Everyone has to look up at him. He said with a smile, "My name is Naruto Namikaze, and I'm here to wait for my sensei." Given the angles, he didn't think anyone could see it over his collar, though. Namikaze made a few noises, so he gave him the letter that said he had passed a genin equivalence test. Iruka opened the letter and read it all. It was strange, but everything seemed fine. "I can't tell you exactly what to do, but the Hokage has told you to do it. Welcome. I take it you're the third member of Team 8? He asked, pointing to Kiba and Hinata. He walked over to the two and said with a smile, "That's what Tsunade said." Kiba muttered an expletive under his breath. This might mess up his plans to ask Hinata out. Girls were going to throw themselves at him in droves because he was tall, mysterious, and fascinating. But Hinata would never do something like that. Kiba gave a small smile when he thought of that. As this giant walked toward them, Hinata didn't know what to think. She told herself that he was beautiful, which isn't often said about men, and that at first glance, he seemed nice. As he stood in front of her and took a dramatic bow, her cheeks got a little warm. I think the beauty in front of me is Hinata Hyuga. Am I wrong, milady? He asked, keeping his bow low enough for them to look each other in the eye. And no, she stuttered, and her face turned even more red. He stood up straight and looked at Kiba, trying not to rip out the throats of either of them. He looked at the big dog sitting next to Kiba and said, "That must make you Kiba Inuzuka. I've heard you're good at your clan's jutsu. I take it this is something you know?" "Akamaru," he said, a little nervous. He felt like fighting this person instead of talking to him. At that moment, Akamaru started to growl at Naruto while showing his teeth. "That's not nice," Naruto said calmly as he looked Akamaru straight in the eyes. After a while, the dog calmed down, but it kept its eyes on the vampire. Peeved, animals always know. A cool voice from behind Naruto said, "Hey, Scarecrow." It made him think of a certain weasel-masked Anbu he once fought with, but in a more cocky way. "Sasuke Uchiha," he said as he turned to face the boy, who was standing about 6 feet away by a desk. When he saw the boy's hair, it made him laugh. "You know, that's why Itachi-kun always wore his hair so long. It kept it from looking like a duck's ass." When the last Uchiha's brother was mentioned so casually, he stopped and was shocked that this man knew him. The surprise turned to anger. "How do you know that man?" he shouted, getting closer. "Ninjas don't tell all of their secrets, Sasuke-san, and Itachi-kun might be upset if I told all of mine. He taught me some jutsu and my work ethic. It wouldn't do for me to go against what he taught me," he said, his smile angering the Uchiha in front of him. It made the Uchiha think of an old painting of a kitsune getting into trouble. As if on cue, a woman with black hair and she walked in wearing a red and white dress that was all her own and asked for Team 8. "Yane, Sasuke-san. Maybe next time you won't be such a jerk, and maybe I won't ask you any questions," he said as he turned and left with Hinata and Kiba. It took Sasuke a moment to figure out that he meant he would never answer his questions. Sometimes it was fun to be a vampire. Main Street. After they said their names, Kurenai said, "I was thinking we could stop at a restaurant and get something to eat while we talked about ourselves." They were on the same main street, so Naruto didn't have much of a choice but to take the offer, even though his food could have been the waitress. "I don't do well in places where there are a lot of people," he suggested. "Why don't we just get takeout and go to the training field, where we'll be training for the next few months?" He used some of his power to get them to agree with him. "That actually sounds a little better. Get to know the area and all that, right?" asked Kurenai, who liked the idea. "Yes, that's true." He turned to face the Inuzuka heir and said, "Why don't you and Hinata get the food? Kiba and I will go to the field." He said, "Tell them what you want, and let's go." He needed to talk to the heir about how he was looking at the heiress. "Oh, okay. I don't know, I guess one order of dango. There's a stand a few blocks east that sells really cheap but pretty good ones," he said as he handed over the money for the order. "Naruto-san, may I ask why you chose Hinata and me to get the food while you and Sasuke went to the field?" Kurenai asked in a sweet way to hide the obvious question. "In the past, I've had trouble with Inuzukas and their dogs. It's kind of private, and I'd rather that only Kiba heard it, but I guess Akamaru will too. It's not sexist, if that's what you mean. It would just give us a few minutes to talk," he said calmly, disarming the situation without using his powers. "Oh, I see. Sorry about that. Too many shinobi think poorly of Kunoichi for my taste," she said. "I apologize, but sometimes I get too emotional about things." "No problem. I, too, sometimes find this kind of sexism in comments that aren't meant to be. But I'm getting off track. Where is the training ground again? 9. She asked, do you know where it is? Kiba walked behind Naruto for a few steps after he nodded and started to walk away. She smiled at the heiress sitting next to her. Be happy that at least one of your teammates has a good head on their shoulders. Hinata got red in the face when she realized what he meant, but she nodded and went with Kurenai to get the food. Kiba was worried because Naruto had been quiet the whole way. Now that they were there, he thought the words would come to him in a few seconds. That made him worry for some reason. I'm going to be honest, Kiba-san. Animals are very scared of me because of my bloodline, just like you are. Akamaru will tell you that I'm not natural, and in a way he's right, but I promise you both that I'm not what your instincts say I am, he said, pausing between each word. Second, you need to stop caring about Hinata-san. What did you do? It has nothing to do with my bloodline. I don't like to say that I can tell what a person is like just by looking at them, but the two of you would never work. It would just cause unnecessary pain, he said, expecting a look of disapproval. Well, what? Are you the right person for her? He growled. Our relationship would end much more quickly than yours. I'm telling you this because we need to work together. We need to be a team, and mixing love and lust, no matter how strong or weak, will only kill us. I don't think you'll give up right away, but you're 16. Have you ever left the village? He asked with a knowing smirk that got Kiba's attention. No. He carefully replied. There's a small town one day west of here. It has a lot of bars, casinos, and pretty women. You're not interested in Hinata because of who she is, right? He asked with a smirk that grew wider as he flushed. Trust me, Hinata is the kind of girl who needs a boyfriend. You seem like the kind of guy who would love to go to a brothel for the day. I guess. He said, beginning to feel bad about what he had done. I'll tell you what. The next time we have a chance, I'll take you to Hirin. If you have a ninja headband, you're allowed to do everything, Naruto said. Kiba's jaw dropped. You don't mean. Look, I'm just trying to stop a disaster from happening. If a quick trip to a brothel is all it takes to show you that there are other women out there, I'll pay for the first night, he joked. He missed being around people without feeling like he had to kill them, but this was fine. He could see Kiba's soul and had seen Hinata's soul. The two wouldn't work together, and it would make his job harder. A few vampire suggestions here and there, a quick trip to a brothel to prove a point, and maybe teaching the boy how to talk to a woman without sounding like a drooling lecher would be a small price to pay for smooth sailing. At least the heiress looked like she knew what she was doing. Kiba asked, You're kidding, right? After only 10 minutes of talking, the guy offered to take him to a brothel and pay for the first night. He knew about kindness, but damn. Kiba, I'm not kidding. I don't think we'd have a chance for a while, and your mother might try to kill me afterward, but I don't like to see people in pain. Unless I'm in the mood to hear some screams. And you and Hinata would only cause pain and maybe regret. We've only known each other for 10 minutes, but you're giving me life advice like you're 57. What the hell? Asked Kiba. I never told you had to listen, but I fell in love a while ago. It was kind of like what you were going through, and it ended in a very painful way. Do whatever you want, but don't say I didn't tell you. Stop talking about that, he said, pointing behind Kiba. Kurenai-sensei and Hinata-san are almost here. He didn't have to tell the boy that he had been lying about his past. It took the heir a moment to turn around and look, because the drug had slowed down his reactions a bit. He would feel better in a few minutes, but he wouldn't do anything stupid that would hurt Hinata. The girl would probably be happy with the change, but it's unlikely that she would ever find out about it. He asked, where? Because he didn't see anyone. Then, from far away, he saw two small dots, and his jaw almost dropped. You can see out that far? The bloodline. He said, "They're a little blurry, but I can still tell it's them." He was too close to the two virgins, and the smell of blood told him that one of them was on her period. That's great. Just awesome. What a bloodline. What's it called? Asked Kiba, who was curious. Akamaru said something that sounded like unnatural beast, but Kiba didn't hear it. Naruto said, "Let our friends bring the food first. I'd hate to have to explain more than once." He did this by pretending to move around uncomfortably. It's kind of sensitive. Oh, and could you keep our small talk to yourself? If Kurenai-sensei knew I offered to take you to a brothel, she would probably cut off my testicles. Yeah, right after she cut off my balls, Kiba said with a joke, making his teammate laugh. This may not be all that bad. Kurenai-sensei seems like she can teach me a lot. Naruto-san is friendly, and Hinata is just as friendly. Not likely to take me to a brothel, but still pretty nice. Kurenai handed a small brown bag to Kiba and said, "We're here." He thanked her and then started to work. Hinata said, "You didn't ask for anything, so we just got you an order of dango." She was a little scared of Naruto and interested in him, but he took the bag with a smile. "Thank you, but I don't need food right now." "Bullshit, I'll put them away for now," he said, "unless you want them, Akamaru." The dog turned its head to the side because it didn't trust the vampire. But the vampire smelled so good. An offer of peace? Kurenai, Kiba, and Hinata watched as Naruto and Akamaru seemed to be having a silent, still conversation, with Naruto grinning like a fox and Akamaru tilting his head to the side. "You understand him?" asked Kiba, a little bit surprised. Naruto took one piece of the dango out of the bag and gave it to the dog. Once it was gone, Akamaru stopped for a moment and then licked Naruto's hand once. "Alright. You can talk, but I can only listen and hope he gets what I'm trying to say with my hands." Still, Inuzuka dogs are smart. "He won't trust me, and I doubt he ever will, but he can stand me," Naruto said in a happy tone. He turned to his teammates and let his smile get bigger. This could even be fun. Hokage's office, after 3 hours. Tsunade laughed as she asked, "You offered to take him to a brothel?" She called Naruto to find out how the first day of the mission went. So far, it was going better than she had hoped. Still, it was kind of funny to see that no-life king, sitting on the couch with a cherry cigarette in one corner of his mouth and an AB+ packet in the other. The slug Sanin thought it was funny that he had a kind of shaky look in his eyes as he drank blood and smoked a cigarette without choking. "Don't say I don't know how to make friends," he muttered as he threw the empty packet of cigarettes into the trash and took another drag. One of the few times Tsunade let him smoke in her office, this was one of them. "That doesn't mean you have a lot," she told him, making him sigh. "I don't know. There's you, Kakashi-kun, Shizune-chan, Anko-chan, Ibiki-kun, Jiraiya-kun, Kiba-kun, Hinata-chan, and Kurenai-chan," he said, counting his new teammates as friends. "My team didn't handle the Kyuubi too badly. They're nice folks." "Hey, Naruto, why do you say kun so much?" she asked. "Why do most men avoid it?" She didn't talk to the vampire very often about personal things, and she just now noticed how he used it. Kun, as far as I know, is a friendly way to call a man. If they are my friends, why shouldn't I use kun? He asked, putting out his cigarette. Unless you're referring to the sexual insecurity that most men have? Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Naruto said, "I see," and threw the butt out the window. "I'm straight, and that won't change for anything. If people think I'm gay because of the way I use words, it's a sad world we live in," he calmly replied as he played with another cigarette. Tsunade joked, "It's good to hear that you won't go through the normal sexual crisis that most teenagers do." The vampire laughed a little bit. "Right on," he said, "I know I'm straight, and if you don't believe me, you can ask Shizune-chan." He was about to shadow step out of there. "Why would," Tsunade began, but then realized what was going on. Naruto's nod and grin made her jaw drop. It turns out that I don't like the blood she gives. We don't know why, but we're lying on a broken bed frame 3 hours after she cut her finger. He said, "Ya-ne," and decided that the hole was just deep enough for him to jump out of. He went into the shadows right as Tsunade's fist flew right through where his head had been. She walked over to the intercom and pushed the buzzer. She loved Shizune like a daughter, and she was going to give them both a hard time. She pointed to the small piece of paper on the couch and said, "Send for Shizune and tell her to hurry." She walked back over and picked it up. As she looked at his beautiful handwriting, her eye twitched. Hey, at least we both wore condoms, a whole box of them. Ya-ne. She wasn't sure if anything she could do to him wouldn't heal in a few seconds. Then Shizune walked in, not knowing what was going on. "You called, Tsunade-sama?" she asked, a little worried when her teacher turned and glared at her. "When were you going to tell me that you slept with the most dangerous killer in Konoha?" she asked, handing the note to her. Shizune turned red and stuttering for a moment before she could speak again. I'm going to kill him," she said, "an Anko." With a facepalm. "Anko? Why do you want to kill her?" she said with a blush, because she was there, too. Oh. Naruto-kun left that part out, didn't he? Basement of Namikaze's house. As Naruto got into his coffin, he felt a sudden chill run down his spine. Shizune was probably called and said by accident that Anko was involved in her first sexual experience, which was with Konoha's most dangerous assassin. No matter how many times they told Tsunade this was a one-time thing, it might take a while for her to get over it. "Oh well, can't say it wasn't worth it," he joked, crossing his arms over his chest and letting his shadow close the coffin. He only hoped that it wouldn't be locked when he woke up. When Naruto saw that the lid of his coffin wasn't nailed shut, he said, "Well, I'll be blessed." He got out of the big metal and wood box, happy that it had a classic design, the kind that Dracula usually has. It gets wider near the top and then gets smaller again. He thought about writing Alucard's poem on the lid, like the first No-Life King did, but he decided a long time ago that he wasn't a bird of Hermes. Still, he thought it could use a little more of a personal touch. The black exterior with gold designs and the red silk interior were a little too generic for him. Even though he knew there were other coffins like this one, the only truly unique parts were the size and the layer of dirt between the padding and the wood. He looked at the clock and muttered, 1 hour. He got up and started walking to the bathroom, but he stopped a few feet from the door. He gave the mirror next to him an annoyed look. It went from floor to ceiling and showed nothing but an empty room. After a moment of focusing, a surge of power filled him up from the center, and then he saw his reflection in the mirror. If his room wasn't in the basement, he might have opened a window to make sure he had a shadow. "I have more power than most people could ever dream of, and I'm mad that I have to work hard to see my shadow and reflection. TCH, 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 he told himself. It wasn't so much concentration as a desire to see a shadow or reflection. Still, the fact that his anger was so silly made him laugh. He got in the shower and thought for a moment about how hot or cold the water should be. Heat. He could easily get rid of the small amount of dirt or blood that got on his body by going into shadow state for a moment and then going back. But his pride wouldn't let him leave without washing his hair first. Something about getting his silver hair back made him happy. Even so, he still used shadow state to dry himself off. As he walked up the stairs, clothes started to appear on him. He would usually shadow step or teleport to where he needed to be in the house, but humans and Jinchuriki couldn't do that, so he pretended to be both. This meant there were stairs. And doors. And going. Baka humans, he said under his breath as he walked through the door to the kitchen. He walked over to the fridge and opened the white door. The basement door was closed with shadows, so he wanted to fill up before he had to deal with 2 virgins and a human werewolf. Better to be full than hungry, or something to that effect. He grabbed a bag of blood and bit off the end of the small tube without bothering to read the label. He enjoyed the taste and let it move around on his tongue for a while before swallowing. "She's 20 years old, has type of blood, and needs to eat more iron," he said casually as he finished the blood. He threw the packet in the trash and went to the door. As he walked away from his house, he realized that he had no idea how to get to the training ground. He muttered, "Main Street." At least he knew how to get there. Had that much time really passed? Places to practice. Hinata, who had arrived a few minutes before Naruto-san, said, "Gee, good morning, Naruto-san." "Good morning to you, too, Hinata-chan," he said, bowing again in a way that was too much. "The chan doesn't bother you, does it?" "No, it's fine," she said, her cheeks still a bit pink. Naruto's silver eyebrows went up. "Are you nervous?" he asked as he lifted himself up and sat down on one of the training posts. It wasn't far for his behind to move. "A little." "Kurenai-sensei said that if we don't pass her test, we have to go back to the academy," she stuttered, shifting uncomfortably. Naruto smiled his most soothing smile and told her, "Don't worry about it. I've heard of these tests. They're standard for new teams. It's just a seemingly impossible task meant to test our ability or willingness to work together. After all, Konoha has 3 genin cells for a reason. 1 ninja is weaker than 3. In theory," he said, pointing to the post next to him. "Sit down, take it easy, and get ready for some help." "That's it? We just have to work together?" she asked, moving to the pole and leaning against it. The thing was almost as tall as she was, and she didn't want to try to sit on top of it. Quick note. The posts are about 4.5 foot high. Hinata is about 5 feet 3 inches. Yep. We might not be able to reach the goal, but as long as we show we can work together, it'll be fine. Can you work with Kiba and me? He asked, thinking about pulling out a cigarette. He didn't smoke in front of them yesterday because he was trying to stay on their good side. Almost made him laugh out loud. Yeah, they don't care if you're the Jinchuriki for the Kyuubi no Kitsune, but you're screwed if you light up in front of them. Do you mind? He asked the heiress, getting her attention back. He moved the cigarette between his 2 index fingers to get her attention. She asked, why you smoke? Quite often, but I only smoke flavored and scented ones so I don't smell like burnt leaves, he said, letting the cigarette hang out of the corner of his mouth and giving his usual fox grin. Starting to smoke wouldn't bother you, would it? She said, no, but she also took a step away. She started to say something to explain her move, in case it had upset him, but he stopped her. I get it. Secondhand smoke and all that. To be honest, these are more likely to hurt you 3, given that the Kyuubi and I can heal each other, he said, referring to the fact that the Kyuubi and he could heal each other. Not that she was aware of the second part. Oh. Why yeah. She said, remembering his confession from the day before. He told them about the Kyuubi and told them that if they had trouble with it, they should talk to the Hokage about getting a transfer. He took out a lighter and used his thumb to open the top so he could light his cigarette. He put the lighter in his pocket and took a drag. He blew a few smoke rings and a small stream of smoke through them all because he was bored. He kept doing this until the cigarette was gone. He worked on it on top of the post while keeping an eye on the heiress who was moving around. Something wrong, Hinata-chan? He asked, looking into the distance for this other teammate and his sensei. He didn't think she could teach him much. She asked, how old are you, Naruto-san? In Konoha, you had to be 20 to smoke and drink. Good question, he told her, turning to her and grinning like a fox. You're not old enough to buy those, are you? She asked, pointing her eyes at the cigarette box. You're an adult if you have a ninja headband, he said, pointing to the one on his right bicep. But you said you smoke a lot, and we've only had these for a day, she pointed out the flaws in his argument. Good, you pay attention. That's important for a ninja, he told her as he gave her a thumbs up. Let's just say I've had a deal with Tsunade-sama since I was 12. She found that smoking and drinking wouldn't hurt me in the long run, so she gave me permission to smoke. I don't drink, though, if that makes you feel better. Alcohol anyway. A little, she said, feeling nervous again about the test. He pointed to 2 dots in the distance and said, "Kiba's coming." Hinata was shocked by what he saw and looked back and forth between the 2 dots and Naruto several times. Bloodline? She asked, using bloodline instead of Kyuubi, just like Naruto had. He told her, technically. The Kyuubi made his senses sharper, and being a vampire made them even better. Still, he had learned to fine-tune them so that a sudden cricket chirp wouldn't blow his eardrums. When Kiba got close enough, he yelled, "Hey, guys, what's up?" He said, "Good morning, Kiba-kun, and the same to you, Akamaru," greeting each of them in turn. But both of his teammates stopped when they saw the ending, which made the vampire look at them funny. "What?" "And nothing," the heiress stuttered, putting her hands up to make amends. "Are you uncomfortable with the suffix Kiba?" he asked, turning his attention back to Kiba. He laughed and scratched the back of his head as he said, "Never had a guy use it before." "Don't worry, you're not my type. You wouldn't hurt a fly if you could help it," he said, both complimenting and reassuring the girl. She wouldn't say he wasn't handsome, but something inside her told her that the things he liked were bad for her health. "I'm sorry, but you're not what I want." "It's okay, you're not really my type either," she said with a small smile. She made a joke. "I couldn't kiss you if I tried." This made the other 2 laugh. "Don't feel bad," he joked back, "most women need a running start to jump up and kiss me. Or some climbing gear," Kiba said between laughs, which made everyone else laugh again. Naruto smiled and sighed as he looked up at the clouds. "Nay, Kiba. Are you okay with working with Hinata and me? The test Kurenai-sensei is going to give us is to show that we can work together," he asked in a light but serious way. "As long as you 2 keep laughing, I'll be fine," he said with a smile. "Are you 2 ready for the test?" he asked, tightening up. "Yeah, why?" Hinata asked, noticing a slight change in his voice. "Because it started 5 minutes ago. Right now, we're all stuck in a genjutsu," he said, still smiling and looking up at the sky. Kiba and Hinata did the right thing by getting ready for a fight right away. Kiba looked around for a sign and asked, "How do you know?" He got down from the post with a smile on his face and said, "The clouds haven't moved an inch in the last 5 minutes. Kurenai-sensei is over there in the trees, and she looks surprised that I can see through her genjutsu," he said calmly, without even making the seal to break the genjutsu. "Not bad, Naruto-san. You told both of your teammates what this test was really about and broke the genjutsu around all of you once you figured it out," she said, holding up 2 bells. "At first, the test was to steal a bell from me, and whoever didn't have a bell would be sent back to the academy." Kiba growled as he stood next to Naruto in a feral stance while Hinata took the Juken stance on the vampire's left. Hinata didn't stutter as she said, "It won't work." Naruto's fox-like grin didn't go away, and he held the handle of Widabra with his left hand. "Your turn, Kurenai-sensei," he said, remembering that he would have to fight at a high level of genin if this got violent. "Well, if you don't want to work as a team, maybe we should have a fight to see where you stand," she said, taking her own position. 4 against 1? "Genjutsu can't fool my eyes, and I can break them in an instant," he said with confidence. "I didn't become a Junin just because I was good at genjutsu, Naruto-san. You should keep that in mind," she said, pulling out a kunai. He let go of Widabra's handle and said, "Don't say I didn't warn you. Kiba and Akamaru, you should try to move her around. Hinata, use the Juken whenever you see a chance," he said quietly, his lips not moving at all. Kiba asked, "And you?" Because he was happy with the plan. "I'm the spear's tip. Go, he said as he ran at low chunin speeds toward Kurenai. It's not smart to attack head-on, she said calmly as she held her kunai out for Naruto. Naruto's voice came from behind her, but he asked, who said anything about head-on? She turned around in time to block Naruto's katana with her kunai, but the blow was so strong that it almost knocked her down. In back of you. Kurenai looked over her shoulder and saw that the other Naruto was still coming toward her with his sword drawn. She quickly used Kawarimi to switch places with a falling leaf a few meters away, but she was shocked when Naruto, who was coming at her, kept swinging and cut the leaf in half. She almost screamed when blood flew from the cut, but in an instant, all the blood and the two pieces of the clone turned into black dust. Shut up. Kurenai just barely heard the cry in time to get out of the way of the two spiraling attackers, but she quickly used genjutsu to make them lose their balance and crash. The second long distraction cost her, though, as she felt several stinging blows land on her back and shut down her chakra points. She was shocked by their performance but still managed to do another Kawarimi. She found out the day before that they were serious about becoming ninjas, but she didn't think they could do it. From behind her, Naruto said, "Good evening." She turned around and kicked at the side of his knee, but when she turned around, he wasn't there. Again, his voice came from her left and teased, "You seem surprised." This time, though, she guessed how he would move and kicked him hard to her right. It hit the vampire in the side of the knee, causing him to fall to one knee in front of the Junin. Two kunai were pressing against her neck, a Jukin strike was waiting an inch from her heart, and the Naruto in front of her turned into black dust that was quickly blown away by a wind that didn't exist. Not bad for a first match, eh, Kurenai-sensei? Naruto said with a smile as he came out of the shadows a few feet away. To be fair, it was hard, but you shouldn't have paid so much attention to my surprises. If this was a real fight, you three would have died a long time ago, Kurenai said in a serious tone. But this was a great spar, and I'll have to fight each of you individually to get a good feel for you. You pass, she said with a smile. Hinata took her hand away from the kunai and took them away. Kiba fell flat on his back, while Akamaru turned back into a dog and laid down. That crash hurt, he groaned, which made his teammates laugh, but Kurenai kept her eyes on Naruto, who was standing a few feet away. She asked, "Naruto-san, what was that clone you used?" "I can't say I've ever seen it before. Think of them as advanced Kage Bushin. They can't do much offensively, but they can take a lot of damage before they die. The one in front of you only died because it was no longer needed," he said with a smile as he took out another cigarette. "You don't mind, do you?" he asked, his left corner of his mouth hanging open. "Well, yes, I do." She sounded a little more serious as she said, "I don't want you to smoke during training or missions. It's a dirty habit, and I don't want you to do it." "Then I won't light it," he said with a smile that didn't change at all. "So, what do you think? What kind of group are we?" he asked as he leaned against the tree next to him. Kurenai smiled and took a step back so she could see all of her students, which made her happy in a way. At first glance and in the first fight, it looked like a combat team that could track. She said, "I don't know if your senses are as good as Kiba and Akamaru's, but if they are and you're good at fighting together, you three might make a great hunter-ninja team." "No thanks. Do you know what those white masks are? They look so bad. It would be wrong for me to hide my face behind one," Naruto said with a bit of sarcasm, causing a small group of people to laugh. "What if I do something really brave? If the fair maiden wants to give me a kiss, she has to get a ladder first. It would be like getting to the end of the rainbow only to find out that the leprechaun had put a bomb there." Kiba said, "Wow," while shaking his head and laughing. "If you find a woman willing to go through all that trouble for one brave act, they better write about it in history books," he joked as he stood up. "Once you two are done making up stories, we can go get lunch and come back to train," Kurenai said, reminding herself that they were just messing around. Naruto said calmly, with a smile still on his face, "I'll just stay here. I'm not hungry." Again, it's a bunch of nonsense. He was always hungry. There was never a time when he wasn't. Well, we didn't just want to go get food. Kurenai replied, I wanted to talk to you three about possible training options. She knew that two events didn't make a pattern, but she was beginning to wonder why he avoided people. When she thought about it, he had never touched any of them and always stayed at least 2 feet away. Even the blade of his katana, which was 4 feet long, seemed to be there to keep a certain distance. Where did you say we were going? He asked, trying to figure out what was going on before he did anything. He thought he was going to be tricked into doing this. The restaurant Yen's. Kurenai was really starting to wonder if he had made a good choice by going to a restaurant. At Naruto's suggestion, they chose a booth that was far from the door and where there weren't many people. He pushed himself against the wall, giving Hinata more space than she knew what to do with. Kurenai was sitting on the other side of him, and Kiba was next to her. Akamaru was lying down next to the boy. Hinata asked, Hey, are you okay, Naruto-san? As she touched his forehead to check for a fever. Don't touch me, he said in a rough, cold voice. The shocked heiress took her hand away and gave the man with silver hair some room. Speak, he said as he tried to stop shaking. So many heartbeats going on around him, like a symphony of things to look forward to. Kurenai, worried about the boy, told Naruto, you can leave if you don't like it here. Then I'll be at the training field, he said, and then he was gone. He seemed to be there 1 second and gone the next, and Kurenai thought he was the shadow Keke Genkai he had talked about the day before. Kiba looked at where he had been sitting and asked, is he going to be okay? I don't know, Kurenai said with a creased brow. 10 minutes later, on the training ground. Naruto rolled up the blood packet that was empty and put it in his pocket. Drinking in the middle of the day was risky, but going into that restaurant was a whole other level of stupid. He lit a cigarette and took a drag, thinking about why he started smoking in the first place. Certainly wasn't to get rid of stress. He took the still-lit cigarette out of his mouth and broke it up in his hand. When he opened it, the pieces that had been torn off fell to the floor. He decided to stop, but he knew it would only be a matter of time before he started something else that would take over his life. He ground his teeth together and wanted to drink Konoha dry more than anything. A few minutes after noon, he already wanted to kill people, which was almost a new record. He said, this isn't going to be worth it, as he thought about going after Orochimaru and trying to kill him. Before he could think too much about it, though, his good hearing picked up the sounds of his teammates coming closer. As they got closer, he was facing away from them and had no plans to turn around. Hinata asked her teammate, Naruto-san, are you feeling better? Because she was worried about him. She did not get too close, though, as Kurenai had asked. He said, no, but his voice was back to its usual ethereal sound. Let me try to avoid a place like that in public the next time, he told Kurenai. Kiba asked, what's wrong with public places? He didn't know any better than the other two. There are a lot of people there. The short answer was, that's the problem. Naruto-san, what he means is, what's wrong with the people? What's wrong? She asked, wondering if this had anything to do with the Kyuubi. Are you scared of people or contact? Are you claustrophobic? He looked over his shoulder at them and said, drop it. What you find won't be good. Hinata said, and Naruto-san, if you just tell us, we might be able to help. Drop it, he said as he looked back at what was in front of him. Kurenai thought about what she could do for a moment, trying to figure out the best thing to do. Why don't you and Kiba go home for the day, Hinata? She said, I want to talk to Naruto alone, and I think it would be best to continue training tomorrow. She tried to give them a friendly smile. Kiba sighed and turned away with Akamaru in tow, saying, good luck. Hinata bowed once to Kurenai and wished Naruto a good night before doing the same, knowing that she should not be there. Once they were out of sight, Kurenai walked around Naruto, keeping a 5-foot gap between them until she was standing in front of him. His face looked tight, like it was very hard for him to stay still. Naruto-san, secrets could ruin this team before it even gets started. If you don't like being around a lot of people, you need to tell me, Kurenai told him. Being around a lot of people doesn't bother me. When I'm around people, I have a problem with wanting to rip their throats out, he said calmly, planning to use this as part of the Kyuubi leaking out. What? She asked, surprised by how direct the comment was. I think it's because of the Kyuubi. When there are a lot of people around me or just a few in a small space, I can't think of anything else but killing them. Why do you think I've kept a little distance between us? Give me a few weeks, and I might be able to touch one of you without flinching, he said seriously, staring into her eyes. He used his power to calm some of the fear she was feeling and to make himself seem less scary. Don't worry too much about it. Just keep me away from big crowds and restaurants, and we won't have any problems, he said with a smile. Now, I think you wanted to talk to me about training options, right? Oh, yes, you're right, Kurenai said, shaking her head to get her thoughts straight. There was a moment when everything went blurry. From what I can tell, you're fast, and after that hit earlier, it doesn't look like you need to worry about strength training either, she said, remembering how hard the swing was. Besides practicing attacks with Hinata and Kiba as a team, I want you to work on perfecting your jutsu. That sounds good, he said with a calm smile on his face. If that's all, I'd like to go home and rest. Between the restaurant and the fight with you, today has been a little hard. Sure. She told him, same time tomorrow, and don't be late. After giving another overly dramatic bow, he turned and walked into the shadows. Once he was far enough in, he seemed to flicker and disappear. Naruto came out of the shadows in a corner of Tsunade's office and said, "We need to talk." He smiled and bowed to the other two guests. "Good evening, Shizune-chan and Anko-chan." Even though the Godime's eye was twitching, she told the two kunoichi to shut up because she knew this was only for her ears. As soon as the door closed, Naruto got very serious. He asked with a frown, "Are you trying to kill someone? Do you have any idea how much I wanted to kill a whole restaurant full of people not even a half hour ago?" She asked, lacing her fingers together, "Did you?" "No. But I'm not sure how long I can go on like this. Between my hunger and their lack of knowledge," he said, "it's not a good mix. I may be a gentleman, but I'm not a saint. This will end badly. Even more so considering how unique my curse is." She said, "I guess you're right, but there's not much I can do right now." She thought the vampire deserved some comfort, but it would be in a roundabout way. Only the weakest vampire can't stop being hungry. Are you the king of no life, or not? Naruto was tense for a moment, but then he let out a smile as the rest of him did the same. He bowed and went away, leaving Godem to praise herself for a well-motivated vampire. Then she thought about Shizune and Anko and what she had seen them doing earlier. She sighed and reached under her desk to find the hidden jug of sake. At least she won't get pregnant, she said as she drank and made a toast to no one in particular. After a week, training grounds came out. As the three genin coordinated their work, Kurenai said, "Effective." They were fighting one of Naruto's shadow clones, and they were using the same strategies they had used when Kurenai had tested them. Kiba, Akamaru, and Naruto were basically the strongest ones, so they would be the first ones in. The target would have to deal with Naruto's sword and speed if they avoided the Getsuga. While Kiba and Akamaru turned, Hinata would rush in with Naruto, hit a few times with the Juken, and then run away as the Inuzuka got closer. It was fine for fighting one person at a time, but Kurenai, like all ninjas, knew that this was rarely the case. Naruto gave the answer with a variety of large area jutsu, which wasn't surprising given the chakra pool the Kyuubi gave him. In short, he'd get rid of some people before Kiba came in to get rid of a few more, and Hinata would use the Juken to fight small groups. After a short time to recover, Naruto would join Hinata in the individual fights. Any worry he had about touching them quickly went away, and he said it was because he got a simple reminder of who he was. He didn't have to worry about that for a while because Kurenai had kept their conversation a secret. Good, said Kurenai as a Juken hit to the heart of the clone made it explode. Naruto hadn't told them that he was making the clones pop when he did attacks that would kill a human but not when he did attacks that would kill a vampire. Okay, we've been working for a few hours. Do you want to call it a day, or do you want to go on your first mission? Let's take the mission. Kiba yelled with excitement. Naruto joked, don't get too excited, Kiba-kun. Our first mission will be AD, which means we'll probably just pick up trash or help an old lady carry her groceries. Both the heir and the heiress looked at him with shock, then turned to Kurenai to make sure. He is correct. D-rank missions are mostly about working as a team and making a little extra cash, but they aren't anything special. C-rank missions are different, but they usually involve escorting people or getting rid of small groups of bandits, she said. Hinata asked as she bit her lip, eliminating? She knew that part of her job was to kill, but... Naruto put a comforting hand on her shoulder and said, that means we go kill them. The urge to rip off her arm was quickly pushed away. It doesn't always look good, but it's better than letting them keep going. Some thieves have some sense of honor, but others will rob and rape almost anyone, he said in a cold voice. I've killed a thief before. For years, he stole from merchants and raped women. One night, he tried to rob the wrong person, Naruto said, trying to give them the conviction they needed to accept a ninja's life. If they thought it would mean less evil in the world, it would be much easier. Hinata was shocked and asked, why you've killed before? Kiba asked, what? What was it like? He wasn't sure if he should have. At the start? You might be able to see yourself killing them from a third-person perspective. Then comes a wave of sickness and quite a bit of disgust. He said, because of some bad things that have happened to me, I've become immune to the effects. He was talking about the Kyuubi. If you tell them this now, they might not freeze when he cuts someone in half without looking twice. Kurenai coughed to get their attention because she thought she had let this go on long enough. That's enough of that for now. Do you want to go find a mission? She said, D ranks aren't that bad. They also give you time to think or help you forget about something. She's right. Enough with the sadness and fear. Let's go on our first mission as Team 8, he said with a smile as he led the two teens toward town. If it's that damn cat, I'll kill it, he said, keeping his fox grin. What cat? Asked Kiba, who didn't know. Tora is the cat of the daimyo's wife. When Kurenai thought back to her time as a genin, she said, it always runs away, and finding it is a D-class mission with fair pay. If you don't mind the scratches. Back then, the Tora was different, but it had the same problem. How did you even know about the cat? I helped both Tsunade and Sarutobi when he was Hokage, and I've seen several teams come back with the cat, he said, as if the memory made him want to hit something. Hinata said softly, it can't be that bad. She didn't understand how a cat could cause trouble for genin. Kurenai said, let's just try to get a mission that doesn't involve the cat, and leave it at that. The vampire agreed with a smile. The walk to the Hokage Tower was pretty short and uneventful, but Naruto's constant fox grin seemed to scare a few people as they walked by. It was almost as if he knew something they didn't. The person at the front desk greeted them and showed them where to go to get their missions. When Naruto opened the door, Shizune was sitting in the seat that was supposed to be for Tsunade. This confused Naruto. The front of the desk went all the way to the floor, and it was big with lots of drawers to hold the many mission scrolls. The chair was also big and made to be comfortable. They got closer to the blushing apprentice, but Naruto's smile only got bigger as they did. Naruto asked the apprentice, did Tsunade ask you to cover for her while she went drinking? The apprentice sighed. Yeah. People come in to talk to the Hokage about a mission and see me sitting here, she said as she moved her chair closer to the desk. It could be worse though. Can I help? Team 8, this is your first D rank, Kurenai said in a serious tone. Shizune moved around uncomfortably for a moment before opening a drawer and looking through a few scrolls. When she found one she liked, she took it out and gave it to Kurenai. It's not very complicated, and the pay isn't anything special. Still, it's a good start, she said with a smile, though she seemed to be getting a little uneasy. Then we'll go, Naruto said with a sly grin still on his face. He led his team to the door, but before he closed it, he turned around and gave Shizune a thumbs up. He said as he shut the door, "Keep up the good work, Anko-chan." Anko? When the vampire turned around, Kurenai said, "I thought that was Shizune." Naruto stopped and looked deep in thought. He asked himself, "Did I say Anko?" Then he gave a shrug and pointed to the door next to him. "I made a mistake. Let's get going." As soon as Naruto shut the door, Shizune grabbed the arms of the chair with such force that her eyes rolled into the back of her head. She had to bite her lower lip to stay quiet, and when she was done, Anko poked her head out from between Shizune's legs, where she had been hiding behind the desk. She smiled and said, "He's good." She liked how happy Shizune looked. "Well, I'm the same way." Her head disappeared again, and Shizune went right back up to Cloud 9. Shizune moaned, "I love it when Tsunade goes drinking." From between her legs, she heard a slightly muffled, "Yes." With Naruto's group. "This is terrible," Kiba said as the park manager gave him a sharp stick and a bag. "Come on, why don't we do something useful? Like saving a beautiful girl, like you always talk about?" Kiba asked Naruto, who seemed perfectly happy with the mission. "Kiba, would you like to hear what Itachi Uchiha told me that made me want to work hard?" The vampire asked as he poked a piece of trash with his stick and put it in the bag. "Why not?" asked Kurenai on his behalf. Itachi may have been a traitor, but there was no doubt about his skill. It probably wouldn't hurt to hear. Fate is fickle, destiny is crazy, and karma is a bitch. "Shut up and do your job," were his exact words, Naruto remembered with a smile on his face. "Spend your time in the present, and worry about the future when it comes." Not very inspiring, Kiba said as he stabbed some garbage. "We're ninjas picking up trash. Man, that poster really lied to you." Naruto said, "Kiba, you've reached one of the many points in your career as a ninja where you can be considered Saul and JWF." He found this oddly relaxing. Hinata asked, What does that mean?" Because she didn't know what she was getting herself into. "Shit out of luck," began Kiba. Naruto finished, laughing with his dog-like friend, and jolly well fucked. "Aren't you glad that you asked?" Hinata smiled and laughed, shaking her head. They were both idiots and had made more than one dirty joke to each other in the past week, but they were good teammates and great friends. Life could be worse. Naruto muttered, "Female, deflowered, 31, type B blood. Needs to drink less alcohol." He threw another empty packet into the trash. He was taking it easy before today's mission, which was the first C rank for Team 8. He half laughed as he reached for a pack of strawberry-flavored cigarettes, vaguely remembering that he had decided to stop smoking a month earlier. He hadn't smoked since, which was good, but he had to admit that smoke was better than air because he didn't have to breathe it. When he got to the main part of the village, he walked out of his house and jumped onto the nearest roof. It was faster, and since he still had trouble keeping his bloodlust under control around strangers, it was safer. Still, he couldn't help but smile as he watched people go about their daily lives. At least his time with Team 8 had sparked his interest in humans again. He shook the thoughts out of his head and jumped on, because he had something more important to do than watch people. He had told Tsunade about his mission, and it seemed like Kiba and Hinata needed him more as a shield than for any other reason. It meant that Sasuke Uchiha had to be defended once, but that wouldn't happen for a few months, and it might not happen at all if the next Chunin exam was held in Suna. "I need to pay attention," he muttered as he took out a cigarette and lit it. When he thought about the mission, he almost felt, dare he say it, giddy. He knew that if there was a chance to kill, he'd have to fight at a low Chunin level if he wanted to keep up the act, but that just meant he could drag it out. He was dying to hear the screams. When he got to the end of the row of buildings, he just jumped out and took off running. He kept his angry side in check because he didn't want his team to see his eyes turn a bloody red. He knew that they changed when he had violent thoughts or started killing, but he didn't want to tell his team about it yet. He thought to himself with a chuckle, by the way, I'm also a vampire and Konoha's most feared and skilled assassin. He cleared his mind again because he didn't know what the mission could be. C ranks could do a lot of different things. When he saw his teammates waiting at the 3 training posts on the field, he said, I need to be ready. He got close in a short amount of time, then stopped when he was almost there. He said with a smile, Good morning, Hinata-chan, Kiba-kun, and Akamaru Inu. He took the cigarette out of his mouth, dropped it on the ground, and then ground it up. Good morning, but I thought you stopped smoking, Hinata said, with a light smile at the end. No one likes a quitter, Naruto said as he came back and pulled out another. This one tastes like strawberry. Do you think I could sneak in another one before Kurenai-sensei gets here? From behind the vampire, Jin said, not likely. Naruto laughed and put the cigarette back in its pack. Can't blame me for trying, he said with a smile as he put the pack into his trench coat and put it in one of the many pockets inside by reaching through the side buttons. Good day. Good morning to you all, too, she said with a smile. Are you ready to go check out your first C-rank mission? She asked. The 3 of them had come a long way as a team, and Kurenai had been praised by the Godem for keeping Naruto in line. She didn't know why, but she did know that you didn't ask too many questions when the Hokage praised you for something. Naruto smiled like a fox and said, I'm ready. You know it. Bark. Said Kiba and Akamaru in response. Hinata said in a barely audible whisper, I'm as ready as I'll ever be. They got her to stop stuttering, but she rarely spoke louder than a whisper, so they got used to hearing her speak louder than a whisper. Kurenai nodded, turned around, and started walking toward Main Street and, by extension, the Hokage Tower. Kiba talked about what he thought they'd be doing as they walked. Maybe saving a noblewoman who is trapped or stopping a tyrant or something. He shouted, pumping his fist in the air. What do the 2 of you want? Hinata said, Rakan. She had a small smile on her lips. She had accepted that she had to kill, but she didn't know how she'd feel when she did. Kiba turned to his 7-foot teammate Naruto and asked, Really? What are you hoping for then, Naruto? Bandit elimination. I'd like to make life a little easier for someone in a town, he said with a soft smile. But Rakan doesn't sound too bad. We go in, look around, come back, report, get paid, and go home a little richer. Kurenai said with a light smile, that's a good philosophy. Glory and heroic deaths don't pay the bills. Naruto laughed and nodded, then put his hands in the trenchcoat's 2 outside pockets. Get ready, though, because life rarely goes as planned, he said, going over in his mind a list of things he could do without giving away his secret. Burning ash accumulation, Kaiten, Heisekisho, was probably out of the question. The rest of the walk was done in silence, with everyone getting ready for whatever was coming next. Naruto could tell something bad was going to happen because he had supernatural senses. He knew it couldn't be stopped. He hated learning about things like that because they made him feel bad when they actually happened. When they got to the tower, they went right to the mission room, feeling good about themselves. Tsunade was actually in her seat that day. When Team 8 came, it seemed like she was only there half the time, and Shizune took her place the other half of the time. Naruto hadn't told anyone that when Shizune gave missions, Anko was sometimes part of the reason why the apprentice blushed. He played 1 round with them, and they thanked him for bringing them together. He was the only one who needed to know about their relationship, so he didn't tell anyone else. Like Tsunade, others were bound to find out, but when those rapids came, it was best to worry about them. Naruto greeted the Godem by bowing slightly and saying, "Good morning, Tsunade-sama." The rest of his team greeted and bowed about a second after him. She tried not to groan as she said, "Good is a relative term." Naruto asked with a fox-like grin, "Let me guess, hangover?" She rubbed her temples and said, "From hell. But you're not here to hear me complain. You're here for your first C-rank mission, right?" Kurenai said quickly, "We are, Tsunade-sama." He could tell that Naruto was about to say something. "Do you have any missions open?" She took the mission out of its drawer and said, "Just one C rank, a sort of reconnaissance mission." She unrolled it so she could read what it said. "It will take you half a day to get there, and I want at least a day of reconnaissance. There's rumored to be a large group of bandits led by a Nukenin that's causing a nearby town a lot of trouble. If the group is small enough and you think you're ready, you can fight them. If not, you can just watch them and we'll send the right number of ninja in as soon as you get back." "This could go very wrong," Naruto said with his arms crossed. He ended by saying, "But I'm game." Hinata was glad it was recon and said, "Sounds good." Kiba joked, "Better than another day of trash duty." "I'm ready for it," he said, rubbing Akamaru's ears. Kurenai said, "Well, then, we accept Tsunade-sama." She was trying to sound serious to hide her happiness. Tsunade rewound the scroll and gave it to Kurenai. With her other hand, she wrote something down. Tsunade reminded them, "This isn't a silly task posted by a lazy villager. It's a real mission, and you need to act like professionals. Then let an old woman drink until she feels bad about it." The team was able to bow and leave the room with straight faces, but once they were out of earshot, they couldn't help but laugh. Kurenai stopped them from laughing by saying, "Pack for a 3-day trip and meet me at the West Gate in an hour. We should travel lightly, so don't bring too much. We could use some trail rations, an extra set of clothes, typical ninja supplies, and binoculars." Naruto said, "I won't need the binoculars." He knew he would be the lightest traveler because he was only taking a scroll full of blood packets. And, of course, Weedabra. "That's great, but let's not forget that Hinata and I don't have super eyes." "Well, I don't," he said, sagging a little. Hinata gave him a pat on the shoulder and then went to pack. When Kiba sighed and walked away, Naruto got serious and looked Kurenai in the eyes. "Bandits can be the filthiest people on earth. Those without honor should stay away from me," he said in a simple but angry way. He turned and walked away to get ready for whatever terrible thing was going to happen. He was pretty sure he knew, but he hoped he was wrong. After 13 hours, at 9:06 p.m. Naruto, who was standing on a branch between Hinata and Kurenai, said, "It looks like there are about 50 of them, but most of them are pretty beat up." Kiba waited a few branches down, and Akamaru lay down on the ground. He was the only one who could see details in the quickly fading light, since he had night vision and Hinata's Byakugan couldn't reach far enough for him to see much. Kurenai asked in a low voice, "Anything in particular?" They were quite far away. Kiba and she could just make out that there was a fire in the middle of the camp, but she didn't say anything just in case. "Nothing. It looks like they're celebrating. It looks like they raided a merchant caravan successfully," he muttered, trying to find a clue. When he found one, his teeth turned into fangs out of anger. Hinata asked, "What is it?" Because she had noticed the sudden change in his posture. "A thief just got out of his tent," he muttered as he reached into his trench coat. Kiba asked from below, "How is that important?" "He's holding up a young girl's torn and bloody dress like a trophy," he said as he pulled the kunai out of his coat. Hinata tensed up next to him, and Kurenai cursed. Kiba yelled, "Those jerks," and hit the tree with his fist. Kurenai saw Naruto move out of the corner of her eye. When she looked over, she was a little surprised to see that Naruto was getting ready to throw a kunai. She told him to stop because we were outnumbered and the Nukenin hadn't shown up yet. He didn't pay attention. In an instant, the kunai was out of his hand, and Kurenai turned her head toward the bandit camp. It was too far for a genin to get there. The right? Naruto said coldly, boom, as the kunai hit the man in the forehead and sent him flying back several feet. Spot on. A bomb went off in the camp, killing a large number of thieves in a matter of seconds. Team 8 turned to their teammate, but he had already jumped down and was running towards the camp. They could tell from the look in his eyes that he was determined to kill every single bandit. Damn it. Kurenai yelled out loud. Let's go. She yelled, and she and her students jumped after the vampire. As soon as Naruto saw that dress, he said, "To hell with my cover." Some people are nothing but a disease on the earth, and as long as he walked the world, he would kill every diseased fool who tried to make the earth dirty with his life. Reason had lost this fight, and Weedabra was going to win again. No one here could hold their own against the no-life king. The first group of people, who were near the edge of the camp, didn't know he was there until Weedabra's blade tore through them. As he walked into the crowd of bandits, he spat and cut another man in half. As was her style, Kurenai used genjutsu to catch a small group and let Kiba's Gatsuga finish them off. Another tried to sneak up behind her, but all of a sudden, a tree ate him. The genjutsu was cut short, though, when Kurenai's kunai went into his brain. She looked over at Hinata, who was using her Juken strikes to take out several thieves at once. She looked back at the thieves coming at her and lost sight of the heiress. Hinata was holding her own against the bandits. She dodged blades and blows and rained down Juken attacks on them. She couldn't use her Byakugan on the way to the camp because she was too busy running, and the last bandit wasn't giving her a chance. She jumped back to get some space in, hopefully, more time to use the Byakugan. Before she knew what was going on, two strong arms grabbed each of her arms, and two heavy feet pressed down on hers, making her unable to move. She tried to fight back, but her captors held her arms by the wrist and bicep, so she couldn't twist out of their grip or use the Juken. Then she saw the thief from earlier walking toward her. His smile made her think of the girl's dress, which made her feel scared. "Well, what do we have here?" "A little ninja who thought she could beat us," he said, staring lecherously at her body. He took hold of the front of her jacket and her shirt and tore them down. Hinata was embarrassed because her jacket and shirt both tore, leaving only her black bra to cover her chest. The thief smirked and pulled out a knife. He cut the bra off and tore the rest of it off. He touched Hinata's left breast and said, "Oh, that's very nice. Get your dirty hands off of me." She yelled as she fought even harder. The thief took his hand away and hit her hard enough to make her turn her head. "All right, slut, let's go straight to the fun part," he said with a smirk. He took the knife and ran it along the outside of both legs before grabbing the front of her pants waist and ripping them off. He laughed when he saw her pink underwear, but that didn't stop him from grabbing them and ripping them off as well. This hurt the heiress enough that she cried out. She stood still out of fear as he took off his belt and dropped his pants. She fought hard against her captors, especially when he grabbed his member and moved closer to her door. "Scream for me, B*TCH, he said with a smirk as he stood an inch from her. "You go first." Hinata was still as the man was pulled back and cut into pieces in an instant. Her mind was so scared and shocked that all she could focus on was the familiar voice in the long, silver hair. The pressure on her arms and legs went away, and she felt herself falling forward. She stopped when she hit something solid, but she vaguely remembered the soft fabric and the scent of strawberries. She saw a few strands of Silver's hair, and she clung to the familiar body, shaking and crying. Naruto was mad at himself for losing his temper and running away. He had almost gotten one of his best friends raped, and after she barely escaped, her would-be rapist saw him kill them mercilessly. He didn't know how much she had remembered, but he knew it was still his fault. He looked over at Hinata's torn clothes and saw that the girl was still naked, except for a few pieces of her jacket, shirt, and shoes. He made a copy of her to hold her steady while he took the trenchcoat off and put it on her shoulders as quickly as he could. It fit her more like a dress, but it kept her modest. As soon as he was done, she grabbed him again and held on with all her might. Right, she wants familiar, and familiar means safe. I'm familiar, he told himself, even though he was far from safe. He had fed twice without his team noticing, though, so he was slightly safer than usual. He put his arm around her and asked, Hinata, are you okay? He couldn't tell if she was shaking or if she had nodded. Please say something, Hinata. She didn't say anything, but her head moved in a way that was clear. All things considered, Naruto took it as a good sign and slowly led her away from the spot. The battle was over, and the Nukanons seemed to be tied down. As he got closer, he saw Kiba sitting next to Akamaru and looking at his bloody fingernails. Remind me never to trust my gut again, he said once they were close enough to hear him. Kurenai turned around with a kunai in her hand, but she stopped when she saw it was Hinata and Naruto. More importantly, Hinata was wearing Naruto's trenchcoat, while the boy was only wearing a black wife beater. Kurenai ran over and asked, Oh, Kami, is she okay? Hinata seemed to come a little out of her trance when she heard Kurenai's voice. She let go of Naruto's shirt and turned to face her sensei. Before she got there, she was knocked to the ground, and almost right after that, she felt a sharp pain in her heart. The ninja broke the bonds in the genjutsu. He then threw 3 kunai at the girl, who he thought was very important to the team, so that he could get away. He had just turned to run when a whole arm tore through his chest and went through him like tissue paper. Naruto tore the man in half because he had the nerve to attack his friend. After wiping the blood off the man's arm, he ran back to the girl. It looked like the first 2 had missed, but the third had hit the kunoichi right in the heart and was half buried in his chest. Shit. Naruto yelled when he saw how bad the wound was. He asked in a panic, Please tell me you know a healing jutsu or something. Hinata was his friend, so it would have been his fault if she had died. That's not where I work. I don't even know how to use a first aid kit, let alone healing jutsu, she said, sounding just as scared. Kiba stayed away because he knew he would just get in the way. Nothing? Naruto asked, thinking back to what he had said earlier. No. Do anything else? No. She started to say, unless you have something that can fix this. But stopped herself because she knew Hinata didn't have much longer. Naruto knew what he was going to do in an instant. He got down on his knees next to the girl and gave her a little lift so she could look into his eyes. He said, Hinata-chan, I'm sorry. He knew that was all he could say. You have to decide right now. Do you get it? She gave a weak, quickly fading nod. He asked her telepathically, Do you want to die as a human or live as a monster? He did this to make sure she heard him. You have to choose this. She tried to talk back, but nothing came out. She tried to touch his face with her hand, but she didn't get there. He did hear her answer, though, and it made him sadder than he could have thought. Don't look. If you step in, I might accidentally rip out her throat if you do, he said, lifting her a little higher as he bent down. Before Kurenai could ask him what he meant, he opened his mouth wide and bit into Hinata's neck on the right side. The pain shocked the girl so much that she opened her eyes and let out a silent scream as she was pulled away from death. Kurenai was shocked as Naruto stayed attached for a few more seconds. After a second, he reached over and pulled the kunai from the kunoichi's chest. Kurenai almost yelled, but instead she just watched as the hole slowly got smaller. Naruto got off of her neck and yelled at himself for drinking so much of her blood. She needed all the help she could get right now. He stood up and held her in a bridal style as her eyes closed again. Kurenai-sensei, I need to get her to Tsunade right away. I'm good at taking blood out, not putting it in. Get Kiba and go back to Konoha. I need to go ahead if we want Hinata to still be alive, Naruto said, trying to stay calm as he turned to shadow step to the village and was stopped by Kurenai. She asked, What the hell did you do? Because Hinata's blood was coming out of the corner of his mouth. Something I did that will get me to hell for sure if nothing else I did counts. He said, I'll explain later. Then he turned the last corner and ran as fast as he could before jumping into the shadows. He knew it was a risk because turning someone into a vampire would heal all their wounds, but sometimes not fast enough to save them. Hinata had lost a lot of blood to the kunai, and he couldn't stop himself from drinking more than he meant to. On top of the damage done by the kunai, her heart might not be able to make it through the shadow travel. Still, if he had run, the high winds wouldn't have been any kinder. He came out of the shadows in the emergency room of the Konoha hospital and scared the nurse on duty to death. No one else in the was having a heart attack, which was lucky. He ran to the nearest bed and quietly swore as he put the heiress on it. He turned around to face the nurse who was stuttering. Find Tsunade. Now human. He yelled when he saw her hesitate. She passed out right where she was, and Naruto cursed. He made a clone and told it to go get Tsunade while he went back and held Hinata's hand between his. After a few seconds, Tsunade was on the other side of the bed. She did this sometimes and was used to it. What happened? She asked as she opened the trench coat and saw the girl without any clothes on. The clone closed the curtain around them to give them some privacy, and Naruto started talking while taking out a packet of type of blood. In short, a thief did something very stupid that woke up my Nosferatu mode. I went in full speed, and my team followed. Hinata was almost raped because of it, and not even 5 minutes after I saved her, the Nukenin threw some kunai to get away, and one hit her in the heart. It didn't go far enough to kill right away. I had to turn her around to save her, and she lost a lot of blood in the process. As Tsunade set up the blood drip by sticking the needle into her arm, she barely looked up. You're an idiot, and you almost put her in a kunoichi's worst nightmare, she told her as she checked the girl's vitals with a jutsu. The machines could only tell her that the new vampire's heart wasn't beating. At least you saved her twice, he told her. I saved her once, he growled, giving Tsunade a hard look. When I asked her if she wanted to die as a human or live as a monster, she was drunk and still in shock. I cursed her. She put her hand on his shoulder and said, Listen, I'll do what I can, but if you're going to worry all night, it's going to be hard for me to focus. Go home and think about it. If it's anything like your first night, she still has a few hours of sleep left. When I have news, I'll send for you. Before he shadow walked into his living room, Naruto took one last look at Hinata's pale face. He was disgusted with himself. He almost wrecked the living room, but he stopped himself just in time and forced every step toward the basement. He didn't know if he was going to his coffin to rest or to hide. What have I done? He asked himself as he leaned against the wall next to him and felt empty. Part of him was glad that he would be able to talk to and understand another vampire, but another part of him knew what he had taken from Hinata. No, it was the right thing to do. She was dying and it was my fault, he told himself, but the argument seemed to be over. He took a deep breath in, held it for a moment, and then let it out. When you normally didn't breathe at all, forcing yourself to breathe steadily was a good way to relax or, at the very least, take your mind off the problem for a few minutes. After a few minutes, he got off the wall and walked into the kitchen, saying calmly, What's done is done. He opened the fridge door, looked inside, and laughed at all the blood. He was full, so he shut the door and went to get a cigarette. When he reached for the pack, he realized it was in his trench coat. He let out a sigh and went to the box on the counter, where he took out another pack. He lit the cigarette and leaned against the counter while blowing smoke rings. He promised himself, I turned her, so I'll make sure she has what she needs. He made a few copies of Hinata and sent them to the workshop. He did this by keeping in mind her height and general size. I don't think she'll be happy about having to drink, so she'll probably stick with blood packets. She will need the coffin to keep up her strength. He paced around for a few more hours, trying to think of anything else the Draculina might need. In reality, he was going to invite her to live with him. He had everything a vampire could want: shade, blood, and privacy. she might like the second one the most. He had a hard time getting used to being a vampire at first, mostly because he was getting close to puberty when he changed. Hinata was almost done with it, but he knew it would take a lot of quiet meditation to deal with some of the vampire urges. Teenagers want sex, and vampires want blood. When you think about it, that's a pretty bad mix. He looked out the window at the horizon and saw that the sun was just starting to peek out from behind the trees. Soon, Hinata would wake up, and Kurenai and Kiba would likely be back. He had a sudden random thought, which happened often but was usually ignored. Maybe he needed a short break, a tortoise one that would give him the kind of power a no-life king should have. Still, he couldn't just leave Hinata alone and let Tsunade tell her what had happened. He went into an alley near Main Street in the dark because he wanted to follow his new whim. Room 153, Kona Hospital. Hinata was almost completely unresponsive to Tsunade and the nurses. Since she woke up, she had done nothing but acknowledge their presence and nod once. Tsunade had decided to find Naruto and see if he could talk to the girl. She had just left the room and shut the door when Naruto came into the room by shadow stepping. He saw that she was wearing an off-white hospital gown and that the head of the bed had been propped up. "Hey, Hinata-chan," he said, a little bit nervously. Hinata's eyes were a little blurry, but she had a faint smile on her face when she heard his voice. Her eyes were usually a pale lavender color that was hard to tell apart from the whites of her eyes. Now, they were a strange shade of amethyst, which was a mix of the crimson color they turned when she was angry and the lavender color they were when she was a human. He asked her both telepathically and in person, "How are you feeling?" in case the change had messed up her senses. "Okay," she said in a barely audible whisper. "I can't see much and I can't hear much, but I'm so thirsty." Naruto looked at the blood packet hanging from a nearby stand. The tube it was attached to was plugged and didn't have a needle. "I was pretty much a feeding tube." "Hinata, do you remember what happened on the mission?" he asked. "I know it's hard to remember, but do you remember what happened after the kunai hit you?" Before he made her drink, she had to know. "And not much," she began, her throat clearly dry. "I remember feeling pain in my chest, and then in my neck." "You did ask me something right before the second pain, though." She trailed off, trying to remember. He walked over to the chair next to her bed and sat down. "I asked you if you wanted to die as a human or live as a monster," he said. He put his hand gently on top of hers, and she turned hers over and put her fingers in between his. "This won't be easy to explain or accept, so please just trust me." Hinata nodded, and her eyes seemed a little blurry as she looked at him with hope. After her first packet, she would be able to see things very clearly. He tried to think of a good way to say, "You told me you wanted to live, so I did the only thing I could to save you. I turned you into a vampire, Hinata. Be quiet." Naruto could tell from Hinata's thoughts that she thought it was funny, but she also knew him well enough to know his serious tone. In addition to dulling her senses, it made the Draculina feel confused, and a part of her thought it was all a dream. "Hinata, I can clear the fog from your eyes and restore your hearing, but I can't make you believe this. I want you to close your eyes and drink from this straw." He grabbed the tube and said, "I promise it will help, but you have to promise me you'll stay calm when you're done and open your eyes." He could tell she trusted him because she nodded and closed her eyes. It almost hurt to think that he had made her have to go through this. After taking off the top, he gently pinched the tube to stop blood from leaking out and put it against her lips. They broke apart and let Naruto put a little more of the tube in, but he let go when she got a soft grip on it with her teeth. He wondered if he looked as confused the first time he drank as he did now. Her thoughts were getting clearer, which made her very happy, but the taste of the liquid made her think of something else she couldn't quite put her finger on. She thought to herself that whatever it was wonderful. When the pack was empty, Naruto gently took the tube from her mouth and put it down. He then took Hinata's hand again.
"Hinata, you just drank a pint of type of blood from a human,"
he said, Your senses and thoughts should be clearer now, and then gave her a squeeze that he hoped would make her feel better. Open up your eyes. He could tell she was scared as soon as she opened her eyes, but he could also see that she was amazed as she looked around the room. It was shocking how clear it was, and she could see details she had never thought of before. She turned to look at Naruto and felt her jaw drop. He was beautiful before, but now she could see every detail of his sharp face. He did have a scar that went from his hairline, down over his left eye, and ended an inch above his jawline. It was pale and faded, so it was hard to see against his smooth skin. Then she saw the tube she had used to drink, and her eyes followed it back up to the empty packet. Her eyes were filled with silent fear, and Naruto could feel the whirling confusion in her mind. She was wondering if she was crazy, just like he did when he first found himself calling himself Nosferatu. She had a lot of thoughts about the fictional state of being a vampire. He whispered, "Hinata," to get her attention. "Settle down, my youngster." She felt a sudden wave of calm come over her, but the shock she felt at first stayed. He said, "I understand your fear." He knew that was a big part of it. Vampires were not always portrayed as nice people in fiction. When I got the curse 12 years ago, I felt pretty much the same. She started, not knowing what to say. This felt like a dream, but she knew it was real. It was almost too much. Vampire? Finally came the simple question. "Yes," he said with a small frown. "There's a lot I should tell you, and there's a lot I need to tell the whole team. Can you wait a week or so to hear me explain everything?" He asked the heiress, who was confused. "Week? Tsunade wants to keep you here for another day to make sure the change went smoothly, and you have to go to therapy for." He stopped short when he saw Hinata's memories fill in the blank. She shook her head, pulled her knees up to her chest, and wrapped her arm around them. With her other hand, she squeezed Naruto's hand tightly. "It's supposed to last a week, and Tsunade wants you to stay in the hospital for the whole time. Most of the time, it's so she can keep an eye on you and make sure you're okay. Why can't you tell me now?" she asked, looking at him with pleading eyes. "I lost control, which is what made this mess. Usually, it's hard for me to keep my bloodlust in check when there are a lot of people around, but I can't lose control again. So, I'm going to put myself in one of my worst nightmares to make myself more in control," he said with a sigh. "What? Promise not to laugh?" he asked with a light smile. Hinata gave a nod. "It's a party. There are a lot of people, so it's easy for a few to get lost without anyone noticing. If I can make it through the festival at Tanzuki-gai, which lasts a week, without killing anyone, I'll never have to worry about losing control again." She tried to smile and asked, "You're going to a festival while I'm stuck here?" Naruto laughed and gave a small nod. "I already feel bad about the whole vampire thing. Don't add this to it," he said with a smile. "If it makes you feel better, I'll be sad and a little crazy the whole time." "It kind of does," she said after a moment, leaning her head on her knees so she could look at him. "Win a prize for me?" she joked, trying to lighten the mood. She knew he was telling the truth because she felt different, but his explanation might be too much for one morning. "Actually," he said as he stood up, a little color coming to his face. He let go of Hinata's hand as he took the scroll out of the pocket of his pants. His trench coat was hanging on a hook by the door. He unrolled it and took out a few things, mostly some blood packs and sunglasses, which he put on her bedside table. "The blood speaks for itself," he said. "The sunglasses are there in case you want to sleep during the day and the window shades don't block out enough light. You'll find that it takes a lot of darkness for you to sleep, and even a little light in your eyes might keep you up." He didn't know how to do this, but he turned his back on her and opened the last thing. She asked, "What are you holding?" He had never physically tried to hide something from any of them before. I've never gotten anyone a gift before, and I don't know if you're the kind of girl who likes these. But I read a psychology book once and it said that having something to hug and hold can help with trauma patients." he said, knowing it sounded terrible. He turned around, sighed, and gave her his gift. Hinata reached out gently and took the stuffed animal from his hands. She was a little shocked by the gift. It was a gray wolf with green leaf-like designs in its fur. Its mouth was made to look like it was grinning, and its green eyes also seemed happy. It stood about 1.5 feet tall and was very soft. Hinata bit her bottom lip as she held the gift close to her chest. No one had ever given her a plush toy when she was a child, and she always wanted to buy one, but Heishi told her not to because they were for kids. She said softly, with tears in her eyes, "Thank you, Naruto-kun." Naruto sheepishly scratched the back of his head. "You're welcome," he said, giving her a chance to talk. When the excitement of the moment started to wear off, he coughed to get her attention again. "I'll tell you this, Hinata. You are my apprentice, and I am your master. As soon as I turned you, I made a connection with you that lets me control you. I won't ask you to do anything you don't want to, but if I tell you to do something, your body will do it no matter what your mind says," he said in a sad tone. "I think it's terrible, but I have a suggestion that might make your life easier." "What is it?" she asked, a little uneasy at the idea of being told to do something she couldn't say no to. "Well, the first few weeks will be hard. You'll always be thirsty, and only blood will make it stop. Then you'll start thinking about how you could kill people around you and drink their blood. These are horrible thoughts that don't respect any bond or person," he said, biting his own lip to stop the rant. "The point is that you will be able to live as long as you drink the blood from the packets and, I know this sounds strange, sleep in a coffin with the soil from where you were born. But the thirst will make it hard not to kill. So I would want to kill everyone I know?" she asked in shock. "Maybe want. Will you? We hope not. Usually, or at least in my case, I stop thinking about killing someone as soon as I realize I'm doing it. But in the first few weeks, you'll be thirstier than you ever will be again, which will make you more dangerous. But if I tell you not to drink from anyone without my permission or to only hurt someone in self-defense, you won't be able to do anything but keep everyone around you safe. You'll still be thirsty, and sometimes you'll want to kill someone, but you won't. It should make the first few weeks a lot easier, and once you have enough self-control, I can take away the rules. You want me to tell you to do that, right? I'm not sure how well it will help a hungry baby, but at the very least it should help a little." Hinata didn't say anything for a few minutes as she tried to deal with her growing thirst and the orders. She did give him a small nod in the end, not knowing what to expect but hoping it would help. "Hinata Hyuga." Naruto began, an odd and almost mocking tone to his voice. Imagine Alucard talking to Ceres. He does sort of have a mocking tone. "I'm telling you to only drink blood from the packets that are given to you or made available to you, and you can't hurt anyone unless you're protecting yourself or someone else." Hinata felt a chill go down her spine when he was done, which made her feel a little uneasy. He walked back to her and put a hand on her shoulder to comfort her. He looked over at the clock and said, "That should be it." Soon, the party would begin. "Hinata, I have to go now. I'll try to get back in time to see you get out of the hospital, okay?" he asked. "All right," she said, trying to smile. She said, "Go. Try not to kill anyone." She was a little scared by how easily the words came out of her mouth. Before he went into the shadows, Naruto did one of his trademark, long bows. Hinata did see the shadows swallow him, which made her a little scared. She held her new stuffed animal even closer to her chest and laid back down, determined to try to sleep it off. Or something along those lines. As he walked through the crowd with a smile on his face, Naruto thought to himself, "Fuck shit damn motherfucker cocksucker Tsunuva bitch." It's like a weird version of duck, duck, goose, but instead of duck, duck, goose, it's deflowered, virgin, and the winner is the first person to make the vampire hit his head against the wall. The first night of the festival went fine, and the sun was going down on the second night. It didn't have any official times, but it seemed to start at 5 p.m. and end at 5 a.m. There were some stands or bars with different hours, but most of them seemed to fit in with the binge drinking and party atmosphere. From the back of Naruto's mind, a dark voice said, "Someone's having fun." The only sign of his surprise was a split-second pause before he kept walking. "Kyuubi-chan, it's great to hear from you after all those mental walls," he said in a sarcastic way. A few years ago, he shut the Kyuubi out because he was tired of her constant teasing and complaining. That, and the fact that she tried every single night to make him change into his true vampire form. He had once tried to explain to her that killing someone as a vampire and draining them was very different from killing someone as a demon with 10 stories. She didn't believe him, and all she knew was that she could feel what he did when he used more of his powers. He had never used enough for her to feel everything, which was probably why she kept bugging him. It's so nice to hear someone other than Weedabra. Do you have any idea how weird it is to be the Kyuubi and have a sword that looks like a 9-year-old girl talk down to you? She asked. The smooth voice of Weedabra asked, "Would you rather I look like a 9-year-old boy?" I thought, regardless of my own tastes, that since I never dress my forms, you would be more comfortable with a naked girl. What do you want, Kyuubi-chan? Surely you don't want another dose of my sparkling personality? She laughed at her own joke as she said, "I want you to go batshit crazy." Naruto thought, how about I put up more mental walls? I like that idea, and his smile grew. She's been good, so let her do her little job for a few minutes, Weedabra told the Biju, making fun of her. Is it so bad that I want to feel the wind on my face? When it needs me to be almost crazy at night? Yes, was Naruto's simple answer as he walked away. He tensed up as a group of girls giggling about nothing walked by him. They were all virgins, and the smell of blood in the air told him that 3 of them were on their periods. Oh, come on, you want to drain them all, so why are you holding back? The Kyuubi pushed. Because he is not a mindless killer like you used to be, Weedabra snapped, putting up a variety of walls to keep the Kyuubi out. Naruto didn't say anything about what his sword did. Weedabra only spoke when the Kyuubi did, so thanking her wouldn't help. A young girl a few feet to his left yelled, "Darn it." He looked over and saw a dart game with stuffed animals as prizes. His mind wandered to the new Draculina, and he shook himself to get it out of his head. He had come to take charge, not to cry. He went to the counter on a whim and put money down for one game. The goal was to hit a moving bull's eye target. The man put the 3 darts on the ground in front of Naruto, and the vampire picked up one of them. He asked the young girl, "Which one did you want?" And then looked at her. She couldn't have been more than 10, and her sister, he thought, looked to be a few years older. The question seemed to surprise them both, but the younger girl pointed to a rabbit with purple fur. "It's fine." He threw the dart and purposely missed. Ninja weren't allowed to play these kinds of games, and he didn't really look like a civilian. Before coming here, he swapped his trench coat, pants, and boots for a black haori, hakama, and straw sandals. But the fact that he was 7 feet flat still made him stand out. The second one again hit the outer ring on purpose. Naruto pretended to focus and then threw the last dart, which hit the target. The man behind the counter pulled out the darts and said, "Not bad. Take your pick." Naruto took the rabbit and gave it to the little girl, who was very happy to receive it. Her sister looked down at the happy smile and turned to thank Naruto, but he was already walking away. She thought about going after the man to thank him properly, since he was tall and wouldn't be hard to find in the crowd, but something told her he didn't need to be thanked. Naruto said to himself, that was stupid. Moving around kept him from getting too interested in any one scent for too long. For the 30 seconds he stood there, the smell of both virgins stayed in his mind. Sweets, cake, fruit, alcohol, perfume, and all I can smell is blood, he said in a quiet voice. He decided to take a short break, so he got away from the crowd and walked for a few minutes until he came to a small hill that led down to a river. On the hill, there was only one apple tree, which was fine for the vampire. He moved a little bit down the hill and sat under the tree. He could see a path in front of him that went along the small river. He was getting more and more annoyed by his hunger, and he had just finished his last cigarette an hour before. Chain smoking was not a right-wing thing to do. After a few moments, he felt a wave of hunger that was almost painful. He pressed his forehead against his hand as he tried to fight it. A few more minutes went by before it finally started to die down. He didn't take his head out of his hand, though, because he didn't know what color his eyes were and didn't want to frighten anyone. A young woman stood in front of him and asked, "Are you okay, sir?" Naruto looked up and took a chance with his eyes so he could talk to the speaker. She was probably about 15 years old and had long, red hair that flowed in the wind. She had light green eyes and fair skin, but not nearly as pale as his. She was close to 5 feet 2 inches tall and wore a blue kimono with golden wave designs that hugged her body and kept her almost modest. However, the fabric wasn't exactly tight against her B-cup chest, so she probably had to wear it tight so it wouldn't come open. Another woman stood next to her. She was obviously older and more mature, but she looked the same and was just a few inches taller. Her green kimono had autumn-colored leaf patterns on it. Even though he wanted to kill them, he tried to give them one of his charming smiles. It seemed easier to resist than usual, which meant he had made progress. "I'm fine. I'm just hungry," he said, trying to make it seem like they could just ignore it. The younger one's brow furrowed for a moment before she reached into the paper bag she had been carrying. "Well, we can't have that," she said, pulling her hand out of the bag and giving Naruto a small pastry. He looked at it in shock for a moment before looking back at the girl with a raised eyebrow. She walked up the hill and sat down next to the vampire, unaware of the danger. "Don't sit on the ground, Hikari. You'll make a mess of your kimono," her sister said, scolding her with her hands on her hips. Hikari just smiled. "Okay, I'll wash it later." "I can't let a man go hungry when I can do something about it," Hikari said, looking at Naruto. "Go ahead and eat, it's delicious. I was saving that for later, but you probably need it more than I do." Her sister sighed and walked away, heading for the bench a few meters down the path. Naruto was stunned by the act of kindness and had to remind himself that no one here knew him or what he was. He looked back at the pastry and wondered how long it had been since he had eaten human food. He said, "Thank you," in a quieter voice than usual. He brought the warm pastry to his mouth and took a bite. It tasted like a baked ball of dough with strawberry jelly inside. He looked over at the virgin next to him and wondered if she was going to stay until he was done. Her concern was sweet. Hikari said with a confused smirk, "Just go ahead and take a big bite. You're acting like it's poison." "Excuse me, but I'm not used to strangers caring about me," he said, continuing to nibble on the pastry in small pieces. "Hikari Sora is my name." "There, I'm no longer a stranger," she said, as if that made everything all right. "What's your name?" He thought for a moment about lying, but decided not to. The pastry was good. "Naruto Namikaze," he said as he took another tiny bite. She was shocked. "What is Namikaze? Like Yondaime Hokage Minato Namikaze?" she asked, which surprised Naruto because not many people would have made that link. "I'm his son," he told her, turning his head to look her in the eyes. "But how do you know his name? Few people outside of Konoha care about its history. My father is a pretty rich trader who mostly does business with Konoha. My sister and I grew up learning about Konoha's history, both recent and old, so that when one of us takes over, we'll know as much about the place as our father. It's some strange trade thing," she said with a smile. "But the son of Yondaime. This really is a big deal." She tried to stand up and bow, but Naruto gently took her by the shoulder and stopped her. "No one has ever bowed because of my last name, and I won't let you be the first," he said with an odd tone. His voice had gone from a happy tune to one that sounded cold and almost angry. He quickly took his hand off of her, feeling her pulse through the contact. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend," she said, stopping herself from doing a small sitting bow to apologize. Then she remembered what he had said earlier. You said you weren't used to strangers being kind. Do you mean strangers who have heard of you or ones who haven't? Naruto laughed in a short, melodic way that showed how his mood had changed. Whether you believe it or not, the people who hate me are the ones who know about me. When I leave Konoha and talk to people, they are usually the ones who don't care, he said in a tone that was too happy for how sad the line was. Too few know me for who I am. They are my friends and will have my loyalty until their deaths, and maybe even after. Hikari said, that's deep. Most nobles she'd met were complete airheads. Well, I'm a ninja. I guess that scares some people enough to make them act mean, he said as he finished the pastry. An assassin? Hikari asked, her tone suddenly awestruck. Naruto raised an eyebrow and looked back at her, a little surprised to see her eyes almost shining as she looked at him in a new way. Yes. He said, not knowing how much more he could say. What is your rank? She asked, pulling out of nowhere a notepad and a pencil. Naruto shook his head. I can't tell if you'll write it down or not. If you promise to keep it secret, I might, he said as he lay down on the hill. The urges were starting to go away. But no one would. She started. She loved ninja and had asked her father to let her go to the Konoha Academy, but he had said no. Since then, she had gone out of her way to write down things about the few ninja who came to Tanzuki-gai, just so her friends would believe her. That'll do. Ask your questions, but don't expect answers to all of them, he told her as he began to enjoy her company. Most humans stayed away because of instincts they had forgotten. What is your rank? She asked, almost jumping up and down. Naruto thought about this for a while. His team would have to be told, and the Chunin exams were in 2 months, so there was plenty of time for a rumor to spread. Special Junin, technically, he said. If nothing else, this was a reckless way to put his mission in danger and a surefire way to make Tsunade mad, so it was perfect. You sure? What are you really good at? She asked, tempted to write it down. But she had promised not to tell anyone, so she didn't. You don't want to know, he said, connecting random stars in the night sky to make geometric shapes that look nice. Yes, I do, and I can do it. She said, but she was smart enough to say it in a low whisper. The killing. I've never failed a mission, he said offhandedly. He looked over to see that she wasn't scared off, but most people wouldn't understand how serious that was. Before Hikari could ask another question, her sister said, Hikari, it's time to go. Hikari looked torn, wanting to stay longer but knowing that her sister could get her into trouble. I'm sorry, but I have to go. When father's not around, Akira makes the decisions, she said, standing up and hopping down to the path. She turned to face her sister and started walking. Naruto came up behind her and said, Hikari. She jumped and turned around, still a little surprised at how fast he was. Naruto took one of her hands and put a playing card in it. He let her look at it more closely because he knew it was a unique type. He had more than one, but the design couldn't be copied. On one side of the card, it said, Ace of Graves, and had a tombstone with his name and the date he turned into a vampire, get it? The day he died? The other side was also an ace, but this time it was a bloody dagger. Think of it as a gift for your company, he said quietly. Let one drop of blood land on the tombstone, and I'll be called defensively. It's a clone, but when it breaks up, I get all the information it learned and can go to the location. It's a defensive summoning for rescues or any other situation you might find yourself in. And the knife? She asked after noticing his height, he had been sitting or lying down. This is another copy, but if you use the dagger, it's to kill someone. No matter which side you use, the card can only be used once, so choose wisely, he said with a smile. Hikari shook her head and tried to give it back. I'm the daughter of a wealthy merchant, and he's peaceful, so I don't need an assassin or a bodyguard, she said. Naruto took her hand and gently squeezed her fingers around the card. Fate is unpredictable, destiny is crazy, and karma is a whore. There are no sure things in life, so keep the card. He let go of her hand and said, I'd hate to think I left such a nice lady to luck and chance. Hikari was blushing, but she nodded. Now then, your sister is giving me the evil eye, so I'd better go. Don't forget what you said. He took a step back, gave one of his bows, and walked away whistling a happy tune. Hikari stood there for a few moments, touched by his concern. Then she had an idea. A special knight is watching out for me, she thought with a big smile on her face. She turned around happily to face her sister, and she almost skipped. What, did he just read you a long poem or something? She asked, trying to figure out what made her so happy. She started to say, he. But then she remembered what she had promised. He made me promise not to tell. But he really brightened my evening. Come on, sister, let's go home, she said as she skipped along. The following night, Naruto was back in the crowds, but he felt much better than usual. After meeting Hikari the night before, he was finding it easier to ignore his urges. It's amazing what random acts of kindness can do. They were still there, of course, and he fought the urge to take a few of the beautiful young girls away for a drink. But it would be more trouble than it was worth. He had plenty of blood packs and a 7-foot, 20-year-old guy leading a younger woman away. People already called him a murderer when he wore the Nosferatu mask, so he didn't need them to call him a pedophile. That was Orochimaru's neighborhood. Why worry about fighting him at all? Between me, Weedabra's powers, and your true form, you should be able to flatten him. Didn't Weedabra keep you from coming in? I did. But she got annoying, so I decided to tell someone else how bad I felt. Happy holidays. You should know that you can't ignore me for good. Now give me an answer. Naruto sighed and broke away from the crowd, heading into an alley. He quickly jumped up to the rooftops to answer, not wanting to get lost in the crowd. I can only take my true form when there is no light at all. That's what Weedabra can do. Your chakra stops the flow of my blood and souls, which hurts and makes me less good at fighting. You move a little slower and can't get out of shadow state, but that doesn't mean you can't fight, she yelled, sounding happy and proud. Yes, he can, but you wouldn't be able to see the killing from the front seat. You would tell him to do more, kill more, and give in to his instincts in the end. You talk about instincts as if they are bad. I've been going by instinct alone for hundreds of years, and look how strong I am. No matter how powerful you are, you're stuck with me until I die, which will be a very, very long time. If you're good, I might let you see and feel what I see and feel the next time I use Weedabra's powers to change into my true form. Maybe then you'll understand what you want me to do. The arrogant answer was, sounds fine to me. The death of a human was nothing special. She had killed a lot of them and never felt anything, so why would killing one or two up close make her feel anything different? Well, damn me. I didn't think you'd be at a festival, Naruto-kun. Kakashi walked up to the vampire as he came out of his trance and said, I thought you hated them. Who is Kakashi-kun? Naruto asked, surprised to see the man. In his hand, he had the usual porn, but it was less explicit than what he usually chose. What are you doing here? Team 7 has just finished their second C rank. We just had to follow a group of merchants here. There were no problems, but the trip was long and the genin were worried the whole time. They are resting at the Gold Neko Inn, but Tsunade gave me permission to stay for a few days. He looked at the vampire and said, I'm starting to think she wanted me to watch out for you. Which brings me back to my original question. Why would you be at a festival? He said with a slight droop of the head, Team 8 did their first C rank. Kakashi put his book away when he saw that his old friend had changed. He asked, what happened? It was supposed to be reconnaissance on a group of bandits, but... He stopped, his anger making it hard to speak. But a thief came out of his tent waving a torn dress covered in blood and sperm like a victory flag. I lost it. Nosferatu took over, he said, visibly shaking. Kakashi put his hand on the arm of his old teammate to calm him down. Because I was stupid, Hinata got separated from the rest of us and was almost raped. If that wasn't bad enough for her, she had to watch me hack her would-be rapists to pieces. And then Kakashi said, "Take deep breaths, Naruto-kun," because he felt bad for him. He couldn't blame him, though. He had problems with pedophilia, especially what the dress meant, but Naruto already had a lot on his mind. When something like that happened, his battle-ready side, which he and Itachi called Nosferatu, kicked in, and the killing began. "You know I don't breathe, Kakashi-kun," he said in a joke that didn't make anyone laugh. "She clung to me like I was a safe place for her," he said after a moment. "I managed to restrain myself and put my trench coat over her, as her clothes had been ripped and cut off, and I led her to Kurenai-chan. When Hinata heard her voice, she let go and tried to turn, but the Nukenin leader broke the genjutsu Kurenai-chan put over him. He threw kunai. 2 missed, 1 hit Hinata's heart. I tore him in half before he made it 10 feet. I don't think anyone saw me do it either." "I see," said Kakashi. "I understand what it's like to lose a friend. Kakashi, she died right there, and I gave her a stuffed animal and told her I was sorry for killing her 2 days ago," he said, knowing that he would understand what he meant. Before he knew what was going on, the Cyclops blinked in surprise. He apologized by patting Naruto on the back. "I'm sorry. I remember how hard it was for both of you when you had to turn." "Don't bring that up," Naruto said in a voice that was all of a sudden strong and authoritative. "I want to make her being a vampire as comfortable as possible, if that's even possible. But I'm here to deal with my bloodlust. If I can make it through the whole festival without killing anyone, I won't have to worry about it again," he said, changing the subject in a not so subtle way. "Sounds like you'll be here as long as we will. Want to go back to Konoha with me then? I could use someone who gets the weird sexual jokes about Icha Icha," Kakashi said, pulling out the book to show that he was done talking about Icha Icha. "Tsunade-chan really let you stay here after the mission?" he asked, turning to look at him with an eyebrow raised. "What? Do I look like the sort of person who would lie to be lazy?" In an instant. "She said that it was fine as long as I trained them while we were here. I decided to train them during the day and let them do whatever they wanted at night. I think one of them will do something stupid, and the consequences will teach them to be a little more careful." Naruto carefully put it this way: of Sasuke Uchiha, Sakura Haruno, and Shino Aburame, one of them is bound to do something socially unacceptable. Sasuke's pride will get him into a lot of trouble, and his need for revenge will make things even worse. Can you picture him going up against Itachi? That would be funny, but Sasuke had a kind of epiphany on our first mission, Kakashi said to get Naruto's attention. It was to a town called Wave, where a business tyrant was in charge. He paid Momochi Zabuza and his assistant to kill us. How did that work out for them? He asked, but he was more interested in making a joke than getting an answer. Kakashi was still alive next to him. I don't know all the details, but the apprentice said something to Sasuke in the woods, even though Sasuke didn't know it was him at the time. Read the report if you want the whole story, but Sasuke changed after a heartwarming show of love and loyalty. Kakashi stopped and turned the page because he didn't know how to say it. I wouldn't say he's given up on killing Itachi, but he said he'll only fight him if he finds him by accident instead of looking for him. He's still pretty determined, but it took Haku's speech about how precious people are to get him out of Avenger mode. Either that, or the solid kick in the behind he got put something back in place. Itachi Mini? Nowhere near. He's a lot easier to deal with now, but the boy has spent too much time being antisocial. He doesn't know how to talk to people, and it's driving him crazy. Naruto walked toward the edge of the roof and said, "Sakura is probably thrilled." Kakashi went after him, and soon they were both jumping from roof to roof. Actually, she gave up on him because she realized something on her own before he did. When we get back, she's supposed to train under Tsunade because I'm terrible at healing jutsu. Shino doesn't seem to be too affected by the change, and my training hasn't changed. I'm mostly working on controlling his chakra and building up his reserves, since the Aburame give most of their chakra to their bugs. I feel bad for Sasuke. How is he doing in training? Most of the time, ninjutsu and control. He is learning the Chidori right now. I won't teach him the Reikiri just yet. The vampire was surprised by the answer. If Kakashi taught Sasuke the Chidori, he must be pretty reliable. Then should we worry about Orochimaru turning him into a human? He told him, the curse mark can change everyone but the most stubborn. He was impressed that the boy had come far enough for Kakashi to teach him the Chidori. Yes, for sure. I don't know how loyal he is, but he seems to be looking for his precious people. Our jobs just got harder if Orochimaru can find a way to twist it, he said in response. But for now, I think they deserve a break. After the whole wave mess, none of us were really rested, and this festival might be just what they need. Sakura said she couldn't wait to look around, and Shino didn't say anything, but he didn't seem to disagree. But Sasuke seems torn. Let me guess. Between his lack of social skills and lack of communication skills, he doesn't know how to talk to anyone and doesn't want to ruin his teammates' nights because he can't get the stick out of his ass. Is that about right? Naruto asked as he jumped down in an alley. As they walked back into the crowd, Kakashi soon joined him. He sighed and said, more or less. I don't know if I can help him out with that. Is that a favor I hear being asked? Naruto asked with a smile that was almost evil. Well, you are technically a murderer, but when you're around other people, you smile and act perfectly nice. Even if you can't do anything else, you can take him to a brothel, Kakashi said with a smile. That might make him feel better. That reminds me, I promised on the first day to take Kiba-kun to a brothel, he thought, wondering how that would end. Worst case scenario, he gets a girl pregnant and Naruto says he never took him. He liked being in politics because it let him lie to people and have them believe him even though they knew he was lying. Maybe you can get rid of two problems at once? Don't you mean, lose both your virginities in one trip? I don't want to go back to Konoha and get Kiba because I have too many questions and I'd like to be ready for them, which I'm not. Well, if you want to take a stick out of a Uchiha's behind and use it to teach him some manners, go for it, he said, putting his book down as they got close to a sake stand. Want to get a drink? Naruto laughed, but he still walked to the stand. Like the good old days? He asked, thinking back to his time in the Anbu, before he became Nosferatu the Damned. Think back. Naruto said, hello, to his fading reflection as he tried to improve his friendly voice. He said, hello, Taicho, over and over again, his brow furrowing under his white bat mask. He finally flipped the bird and said, go to hell, human. He knew he couldn't use that greeting, no matter how much he wanted to. It was important to his career. Tsunade and Sarutobi had pulled some strings to let him start as a chunin instead of going to the academy, but they could only do so much. If an officer tells a higher-up to go to hell, he might get fired. Someone else like him, who was too young to be in the squad, was supposed to be there. If he remembered right, it was a Uchiha. He was about a year or so older than they thought. He looked at his watch and saw that his first meeting with his new team was coming up soon. He muttered, let's hope this works this time. As he walked into the shadows, hoping he wouldn't walk into the wall again. In a second, he was standing in the Anbu HQ courtyard, where a few people had gathered. Anbu squads rarely had more than 10 people, so he was willing to believe that the 5 Anbu in front of him were his squad. He moved toward them, but kept a safe distance so he could control his desire for blood. He looked at their masks. The animals are a weasel, a rabbit, a rat, a bear, and a cat. It was his group. He said, "Hello." His voice cut through the air like a knife. The Anbu were talking to each other, but he didn't think they hadn't seen him coming when they turned to face him. Weasel took a small step forward and bowed. "I guess you are the new recruit that Tsunade-sama told us about. We're glad to have you join us," he said in a voice that showed how old he was. Naruto just gave a bow back, which was simple. "Thanks for making me feel welcome. I'm sorry if I don't seem friendly," he said. Kat shook her head and laughed a little bit behind her mask. "It's okay, we didn't join the Anbu to talk, we joined to help our village better," she said with a happy tone. "Silence is a ninja's friend," Rabbit said with a small bow of his own. "But you don't have to stay quiet if you need to say something. Now, let's start the initiation." Nani? End of flashback. That was a long time ago, before I joined the Anbu. "You and Itachi were my commanding officers for a few months," Kakashi said after Naruto had finished telling him about those first few moments. "I forgot to ask back then, but did you both have to do the same thing with the rubber chicken and the tutu?" "I had to do it, but Itachi had to be painted pink and run through a nearby town. They were going to change it because I was only 11 and he was 12, but it seems that tradition was more important than our pride and good manners. And age. After that, though, it wasn't so bad. I remember our first mission as a group of Anbu. You two got me out of so many fires that night," Kakashi said as he sipped sake through his mask and laughed. "You two were the prodigy captains, and I was the new guy. Yeah, and the next morning you decided to get drunk to celebrate. Oh man, it was so funny to see you stumbling around with a bottle of sake in one hand and a fake ID in the other," Naruto said as he paid for another round. "It was fun while it lasted, but why did you two let me get tattoos?" "Because of them, I couldn't move for a week," Kakashi said, giving Naruto a mocking look. "I don't understand why you're so sensitive about them, since most women would find them interesting. Why do you think I'm wearing the mask? So you're coming out of the closet at last?" Naruto said with a wicked smile, "Great news." When Naruto suddenly changed into a short, attractive blonde teenager, Kakashi's face turned a lot paler. A girl in her teens. "Hey, waiter. A round for my gay brother. He just came out of the closet." She shouted in a very feminine voice. The woman running the stand looked surprised when the girl showed up out of the blue, but she didn't mind as long as her brother was the only one drinking. She set down a second bottle in front of Kakashi and gave him a wink. She said with a smile, "You know, my cousin needs a boyfriend, if you're interested." No matter how long Naruto could have kept it up, he couldn't do it any longer. He started laughing out loud, and then he quickly changed back to his normal form, which scared the hell out of the bartender and made Kakashi do a facepalm. "I'm sorry, lady, but I'm not gay. My friend is just a jackass," Kakashi said as he took a sip of water. He looked over at Naruto, who was trying to take a breath in a way that didn't make sense. Naruto put the money for the drinks on the table and stood up, still laughing. Kakashi got up and followed him because he didn't know what else the vampire might do to hurt his reputation. Once Kakashi caught up with Naruto, he asked him, shaking his head, "Why did you have to do that?" "Because I can't do many things I want during this festival. Making fun of you is fun and doesn't hurt my or anyone else's health," Naruto said, putting his fox grin back on. "You know, if you weren't my best friend and I didn't think you'd get better, I'd stab you right now," Kakashi said as he pulled out Icha. "So, how did you like going back in time? Enough of a throwback for you?" "Yes, in fact." "And what about Sasuke?" "I'll talk to him, but don't hold your breath. Remember, he was antisocial because he didn't want them to get in his way." "I was antisocial because I wanted to kill them," he said, knowing that the scarecrow wouldn't stop until he at least tried. "Oh, and Kakashi-kun." Naruto began, looking at the Cyclops. "Yeah? Kurenai-chan told you that she liked the kind of tattoos you have. When you get back to Konoha, maybe you should ask her out on a date." Do you expect me to ask out a beautiful woman just because you, of all people, told me she likes tribal-style tattoos? Naruto-kun, there's more to a relationship than just how you feel about someone. I'm tired of one-night stands now, Kakashi said, sounding like he was almost sad. Kakashi-kun, you've been reading the softcore Icha too much. But, then again, I'm the only one who's damned, so good for you, my friend. May you find love when no one else can. Kakashi sighed and put the book down, then turned to look at his tall friend. Are you still talking about Hollow Heart? Kakashi put the book away again and asked, didn't Itachi beat you senseless the last time you fought? Naruto gave a shrug. Suck enough blood and souls out of people, and all you hear and see is screams and terror. I'm a monster. I've made 2 people suffer the same fate, and I'm happy to be alone because it's what I deserve, Naruto said as he walked forward like a machine. Don't tell me I need to shake you awake. Don't, really. Kakashi said, I can't get my foot that high. Hinata is the only one who can understand my situation, and I've seen her soul. She won't take me, he said, brushing some of his silky hair out of his face. Love me like a brother and friend? She does already, but her heart belongs to someone else. I don't have any heart to begin with. Kakashi asked, would you like me to cut your chest open to prove you wrong? Naruto made a funny face and shook his head. Just leave me alone, my dear friend. Naruto said, I'll talk to Sasuke tomorrow. Send him to the field east of town. He then walked into the shadows and vanished. Kakashi stopped walking and looked at the spot where Naruto had gone. Then he looked up at the full moon. He sighed and pulled out his book, but as he moved through the crowd, his eyes never left the silver ball in the sky. Naruto, when are you going to realize that none of us blame you for who you are? No monster is too bad to be saved, he whispered as he thought about the past once more. But then again, if a monster doesn't want to be saved, they can't be. He was sometimes afraid of the vampire. Naruto was once told that the title of No Life King gave him certain powers and rules. He also had to come to certain realizations or else he would give in to his hunger and thirst. But maybe taking Hinata under his wing would be good for him, at least giving him someone to talk to. He didn't doubt Naruto when he said that they didn't get along, but sometimes a quart of sake and a good night is all it takes to make friends feel better. That was really deep. Kakashi thought, maybe I could write a book. But why do that when Akane-chan just walked into Mai's room? He asked, looking down at the book he was holding. Then he wished his friend a good night and went to bed.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.